and to persuade President Trump to do more. Or I mean, to be honest, I think any world leader would struggle to convince President Trump. But anyway, we'll get into all of that after 8. Big day for Ukraine, of course, being Independence Day as well. And then after 9, we're going to talk about accents. And with 1 in 10 people saying that they are anxious or self-conscious about their accent, whether that's ever held you back, either in a direct sense or even in an indirect sense, where you feel perhaps less likely to put yourself forward for certain roles or even speak up in meetings or interviews or whatnot. So that's coming up after 9. This hour, though, we are starting with the story which understandably has dominated LBC headlines today. And I feel desperately sorry today for PC Tom Clough, PC Matthew Blades, the families of. And I think it's worth reflecting that PC Tom Clough was the 38-year-old former Iran and Afghanistan soldier who was killed in the early hours of Saturday, and PC Matthew Blades, a father of 2, who took part in charity runs and was looking forward to coaching his son for the Seton Carew under-7s. And what has gone wrong in Britain, where we see 2 dedicated, upstanding, from what we know, completely model public servants who were mowed down by a car going the wrong way on a dual carriageway at 3:30 in the morning on the weekend. One of the 5 people in the car as well, I see various outlets reporting, Mackay Saddington, now dead, has seemingly been involved in a police chase on TikTok. And again, if you reference those 5 people who are no longer with us and the previous convictions, Cole Worthy used threatening, abusive language to cause harassment. He was harassment, alarm or distress. He pleaded guilty. Common assault of a police officer. Jacob Masiak used a vehicle without insurance, driving without a licence. Mackay Saddington, possession of a controlled Class C drug, a knife in a public place. 3 offences for assaulting a police officer. Assaulted a police officer separately. A few months later, pleaded guilty. Racially aggravated harassment, alarm or distress. And Theo Ray, who had various offences, including theft and assaulting a police officer. And look, clearly, I am desperately sorry that those people are now dead. But I'm really sorry for the 2 officers who put themselves in the line of duty. And I just still cannot get the thoughts of them and their families out of my head this evening. So I'd like to have a conversation with you. And look, I think a lot of my colleagues have rightly and understandably focused on the social media aspect of this. But how did we get to a point where 2 officers are effectively mowed down, where people are behaving with seemingly so little regard for the law and for other people's safety like this? And I think it is worth saying as well, if you haven't kept up with this, because it's something where we're getting more details all the time, there was also another vehicle. There was a first vehicle believed to be a Volvo XC60, which was witnessed to be ramming properties in the Middlesbrough area. Then there was the second vehicle, which you'll have heard a lot about, the Volkswagen Passat, which is thought to be associated with also the activities of the Volvo. Now, as you will have heard on the LBC headlines with Matt Hewitt, Andy Burnham has been in Ukraine today, but he was asked by reporters for his reaction to the awful events on Teesside over the weekend.
It was a devastating incident in the northeast, and our thoughts are with the families of everyone who's been affected. 2 police officers serving their communities, really heartbreaking. The investigation is ongoing, and there's a limit to what I can say at this time. But of course, anybody who glorifies dangerous driving is doing something that is truly reprehensible and unacceptable. In time, we will come to all of the issues involved here, but at this moment in time, it's right for the investigation to take its course.
Prime Minister Andy Burnham. Meanwhile, this morning, my LBC colleague Tom Swarbrick spoke with the Police and Crime Commissioner for Cleveland, Matt Story.
My heart obviously goes out to the officers and their families and the colleagues that they work with every day, and it's just emblematic of how dangerous the job can be, being a police officer. I think the statements from the families really bring it home, the sense of sort of civic duty that these 2 fantastic officers had, saying that they were always on duty. I think that says everything about them, and it's absolutely heartbreaking for everyone concerned, and my deepest condolences go to them and their families today.
And we've also heard from people visiting the site of the crash to pay their tributes.
God bless all the families, honestly.
No one deserves to not come home. I'm a reservist. I've never seen anything extreme, but all of us who put our names on these lines, we're willing to do things like this. No one should have to, but we do.
We'd like to know from you this hour, what do you think causes this behaviour? We hear a lot about sort of lawless Britain, or we hear about, in this case, people, police officers, upstanding public servants effectively being mowed down. What on earth do we put this down to, where people seemingly have so little regard for the law and for other people's safety? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. So Peter Fahey was the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police and also served with Cheshire Constabulary in that role as well. So Peter, thanks very much as always for joining us. I wonder firstly if you wanted to say a few words about the two officers and how desperately sad that situation is.
Yes, it is desperately sad at a moment like this, particularly when we hear the statements from their loved ones, their families. We're just reminded again that behind the uniform, there are ordinary members of the public that have stepped forward to become police officers. They have their families. They're often very active in the local community, very dedicated. These two officers also stepped forward to be advanced drivers. They then step forward again to be armed officers, which carries, again, a higher level of risk and responsibility. So they were clearly remarkable individuals. But on the other hand, it's wonderful to see the incredible outpouring of public support, the enormous amount of money that's been raised, the floral tributes. And I think it shows, Henry, that whatever people may feel about the police as an institution and criminal justice policies and all that stuff, people have a lot of respect for individual police officers, particularly their own local police officers, and they recognise that they go out there at all hours of the day and night, in all weathers, having to face all sorts of dangers and risks and all sorts of human situations and human tragedies. And as I say, we're just reminded of that by this this awful tragedy, which will have an enormous impact not only on their families, the community, but also on their colleagues, those officers and other members of the emergency services that had to deal with the carnage on the night. And just really with all police officers, just because they always have in the back of their mind that they are doing a difficult, dangerous job.
And it was 10 seconds, as has been widely reported as well, from the police pursuit ending to this absolute tragic situation. So, Peter, can I ask you as well? I mean, the thing I'm keen to explore with my listeners, and there's no sort of right or wrong answer to this, but why are we in this situation where we have people with seemingly so little regard for the law? Was it "twas ever thus, or are we just seeing it reported more these days? What do you put it down to?
I don't think it's sort of just down to social media. I think that's a little bit of a side issue. In my police experience, this has always been a major challenge. I particularly remember, a situation in Surrey Police when I was there in the year 2000. And there's two different things you're talking about here, Henry. There are a group of young people who essentially we might call joyriders who steal cars for the thrill of it almost, but then we have also groups of serious organised criminals who use stolen cars to commit other crimes, are a particular menace to the rural community, breaking into farms, stealing machinery, but also breaking into shops, stealing cash machines, almost anything they can get their hands on. And they're often supported by wider criminal networks and extended families. And they have absolutely no regard for the law at all. They have no regard for the safety of others. They seem to take delight in damaging police vehicles, injuring police officers, and sometimes, sadly, killing police officers. So that group of people have always been there. So, and I just don't think we should be naive about that level of criminality, the huge risk it presents. And of course, what we also seeing are cars are getting more powerful, they're getting bigger. And unfortunately, the criminals know that if they drive particularly recklessly, and if they do things like drive down a dual carriageway or a motorway in the wrong direction, the police will be forced to pull off the pursuit. Because they can't afford to create even greater danger for the public. But it is a huge dilemma for the police officers involved and the people managing the pursuit. And really, there's no risk solution to this or way through this.
And it's interesting you say about, I mean, previous conversations, and understandably, as we've been trying to piece together this, have focused on social media and focused on, for instance, the background or the parents of these individuals. And it's a good point you make about it being a somewhat reductive point when you have these big criminal gangs. And look, in this case, there have been 12 arrests, so we've got to tread slightly carefully. I know 8 of which for carrying an offensive weapon or a firearm, by the way. But if we talk generally about these criminal gangs and the sheer power they have in particular areas, Sir Peter, and the fact that they can seemingly, I mean, it would appear in this case, without trying to speculate, but get people to drive down the wrong side on a dual carriageway after being pursued.
Yeah, it's a particular type of criminality. It's almost like the Wild West. It tends to happen late at night and tends to happen using stolen vehicles. It is different from other forms of organised criminality, particularly around things like drug dealing and the sort of things that we see in our big cities. These tend to actually affect more rural areas, and it has always been there. And really, there's only 2 ways you can deal with it. You have to constantly look at police tactics, have highly trained officers with the right vehicles, with the right mindset. You have to have things like helicopters available, to try and manage the situation. And at the same time, you need to have long-term proactive investigations using, highly trained detectives, all the arms of the law in terms of legislation and powers and intelligence to obviously try and take apart these criminal networks. But that obviously has to operate, within the law, with all the challenges of criminal investigation and getting people into the courts. So, it is a huge challenge for policing. And I think, again, this tragedy over the weekend just shows the risks that are inherent in this particular type of offending.
And again, without speculating on this particular case, I've already seen calls coming in, one of whom's a firefighter who I'm going to speak to in a bit, another saying their stepson is a prison officer. I mean, it does point, again, to frontline workers, that point you made right at the very start, and have always been a target, understandably, but there's more means now, sadly and tragically, where their lives are put at risk.
Yes, that's right. And I can only tell you that police officers themselves absolutely understand and appreciate the huge risks that firefighters and other, colleagues in the emergency services face, as well as seeing the tragedy of many other violent incidents. So police officers absolutely understand that and the risks. But what we are seeing absolutely, is often a more hostile environment out there. People being more angry, willing to attack ambulance staff, firefighters. And I think as well, Henry, a general deterioration in the standard of driving. I think we've all been on motorways and seen people weaving in and out of the traffic at very high speed. I can only tell my experience of going into Birmingham. There's some people that seem to regard the road as some version of Mario Kart, almost a video game. So, there are more risks out there. And absolutely, all frontline staff face this. But police officers do take on a particular degree of risk because, they have to run into danger and because, unfortunately, there are a type of criminal who, certainly are reckless as to whether police officers get injured or sometimes deliberately, assault and sadly sometimes kill police officers. So, we need to remember we have a routinely unarmed police force. It's something really special. Thankfully, deaths of police officers are extremely rare. The only good out of this situation is it has shown this huge level of public support, which ultimately shows the public do support policing, support law and order, and recognise the sacrifices that individual police officers make.
Thank you for your time, as always. That's Sir Peter Fahy, who was Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police and also of Cheshire Constabulary. I suppose the main thing I'm keen to get your thoughts on this hour, and I was sort of touching on it with Sir Peter there, is what is the cause of this? Why are we in a situation where we now have 7 people dead, 2 what would seem to me to be absolutely first-class, first-rate police officers? How are we in a situation where people do behave with seemingly so little regard for the law and for other people's safety? 0345 6060 973. But I appreciate it is a story which does touch people in different ways and people have various views on other aspects of it. So, sort of any aspect you want to call in and join in the conversation, you're very welcome to. That number to call on WhatsApp is 0345 6060 973.
LBC
Norms. They want to be gangsters. Treat them like it. It's about time the public and the police. Norms. They want to be gangsters. Treat them like it. It's about time the public and the police that serve us were properly equipped to deal with this scourge. Well, yeah, I mean, you can have a conversation about what that proper equipment means. I'm personally glad that we don't routinely arm all police officers in this country. However, I think tasers is a completely different story. And really, I think we should be giving our police officers the benefit of tasers, particularly when there are situations where they're going to need it, bluntly. Paul in Kingston says, you'd have been blind not to notice that society has gone backwards in Britain. I blame weak liberal laws coming in decades ago. Traditional careers in building trades for troubled young men have all gone to foreign labour. Turning to crime is too easy, sadly. There's no police coming. There are no police. If they do turn up, our weak laws back up the criminal, not the victim. As I say, we've gone backwards, broken Britain, says Paul in Kingston. I don't buy all of that, Paul. I'll be honest. I know why you do say it's been brewing for a long time. I mean, unfortunately, I think it's always been the case that there have been some rotten apples. But ultimately, the means have changed, and clearly in this case, just the most appalling outcome. Sean's in Hertford and wants to go first on this. Hi, Sean.
Oh, hi, Henry. How you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. You're a firefighter.
I am, yeah. So I've done 26 years in the fire service, and I've seen firsthand how disrespectful some youths are to the police in particular. Not really to us, but to the police for sure.
And that's changed, has it?
Well, it's got worse and worse.
Yeah.
It's got worse and worse and worse. But you're asking why that is the case, and it's quite simple. You sort of summed it up yourself. You said, I think 4 of those boys had all been arrested for assaulting police in the past, and a couple for carrying knives.
Yep.
I mean, it's just
assaulting a police officer for 3 of them.
Well, you've answered it. The answer is no consequences. Why were they out? If they've assaulted police officers and been carrying knives, etc., they shouldn't have been out in the first place.
I find it hard to argue with that. The only thing I'll sort of throw in there as well is that it does seem like there's been the work of a criminal gang as well, and I'm not for one moment, pretending for one moment, sort of minimising what's happened here, but do you also have to look at the stranglehold that these criminal gangs can have on younger people as they're growing up with, perhaps absent parents, or, I mean, do you have to look at that as well, the influence and the threats?
I do agree with you. I mean, the absent parent thing, the bad parenting thing, obviously that plays a part. But if there were proper consequences, I mean, this country, as one of your people that texted in said, it's gone so liberal and so weak now. These young boys, I see these young boys where I work, and I don't think they're in criminal gangs and that. They've got no respect for the police whatsoever. The police turn up. They're not like because not many people want to join the police anymore.
Yeah.
They've lowered all the recruitment standards, so you get 2 police turn up. They might weigh 18 stone put together. When we turn up on a fire truck, like most of the blokes weigh 18 stone each one.
Yeah.
So there's just no respect for them at all, and the kids know there's no consequences.
Well, they were suggesting one of the messages as well that it's across all public sectors. From teachers at schools to police officers. But it's interesting you were saying that you don't get much of it or as much of it as a firefighter.
I've only seen it twice in 26 years. Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
There's always 5 of us, and most of us are big.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably that. And, I think it's got to be that. Whereas if the police turn up, there might only be 2 of them. One might be a small female. As I say, I can only say what I've seen, and that's what I've seen.
Yeah, of course, in this respect as well. I mean, it wouldn't have mattered, very sadly, who was in the car by the sound of it. But I do take the wider points you make, Sean, as well. Thanks for calling in, and thank you for all the work you do as a firefighter. Much appreciated. In fact, let's get to Ian in Hull, who's next. Hi, Ian.
Hi there. Good evening.
Evening. What did you want to say?
Oh, a couple of things. Obviously, it's been terrible these last 2 weeks. Obviously, what happened in Ireland as well.
Yes.
With 5 young lads there, and I was having them up in Middlesbrough. So we've got to make sure also it's not all the kids. There are a lot of great kids out there who are not breaking the law, who are working hard and trying to make things into their lives. However, there is definitely a class of kids now who've been not supported. They don't do much. They haven't got focus. They haven't got role models. The activities they used to have are not so much there. The volunteer services at sports clubs without the parents helping and supporting. The governing bodies don't support that as much. So these kids need something to do. You give boys nothing to do, they find something to do, and it's usually not good.
I totally get that argument, Ian. The only thing I would say is, I do get the argument about youth clubs and things, but ultimately, there are things to do if you find it. You don't have to get into these situations where you're in with criminal gangs.
I agree, 100% agree. It's easy. It's an easy out to be a part of a gang, and there's no consequence. The last caller just said that. Absolutely. When the criminal justice system is broken, I think we've got prisons full. My stepson's a prison officer up in Hull, near Hull. And
how's he treated? If we're talking at the subject of frontline workers, I don't imagine it's particularly rosy.
No, it's not great. They're understaffed, totally worked off their feet. It's not good, and the prisons are full of young kids, obviously from the county line.
How do you persuade someone to do that job? It always sort of fascinates me. And fair play to your stepson. It was your stepson, you said, wasn't it?
Yeah. It is.
But fair play to him, because the pay, as we know, is not great, and nothing can pay you enough for some of what they see and go through. It's remarkable that people do that.
It's spin the buck on its head into the police force. You've got 150,000 police officers in the UK.
Yeah.
Of which, it's shift system, so add about how many are actually on duty during the day. Then you've got a 33% chance of being a police officer, of being assaulted each year. Now, if you put that in any walk of business,
is that right?
Life, yeah, it is right. And a third, it's ridiculous stats. Yeah. And it's just, who would want to do that, risk that, for the money they get? Then, another prime example, I was in Hull the other day, and there were 8 police officers for 4 prisoners, escorting them in the hospital. They were there for hours. Well, we were there for hours.
Yeah.
And they were there all the time because they have to be with the prisoners. The prisoners pull sickies all the time in the prisons for a day out at York General.
Yeah.
Because they know they could play the system. Prisoners, they know they have to have police officers with them. So we've got 8 police officers warranted, not on duty out, and their cars parked out in front of Hull Royal. And we've got to be able to have a system better than that. The police need supporting. The criminal justice system has to give proper sentences to these kids carrying knives in particular.
Thanks very much for your call, Ian. Appreciate it. Ian there in Hull. More calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973. If you're just joining us, we're reflecting on this just appalling story. We've seen today 9 men and 3 women arrested, so 12 in total in connection with the crash on the A66. You'll have heard it over the weekend on the early hours of Saturday that left 7 people dead, that left 2 police officers as part of that 7. PC Matthew Blades and PC Tom Clough killed when a Volkswagen Passat had been pursued by police, was driven the wrong way along a dual carriageway near Middlesbrough. Taking your views on that. 0345 6060 973. What causes people to behave with such little regard for the law and for other people's safety? We can take your views on that, but also other aspects to that story as well. Also,
the United States has begun Operation Economic Outcast, an unprecedented campaign against the Islamic Republic of Iran and its enablers.
That's Scott Bessant over in the United States as Donald Trump threatens an economic D-Day against Iran last week, and now his government says that's begun. Will this be the key to ending the fighting in that part of the Middle East? We'll discuss that next. 7:30 The Time, the news, Matt Hewitt.
Andy Burnham's told LBC on a trip to Kyiv that Britain and its allies, including America, need to go further to back Ukraine. He's chaired his first meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, which focused on anti-ballistic missile support. Police say 5 young men who died after their vehicle was driven on the wrong side of the A66 on Teesside may have had links to organised criminal activity. 12 people have been arrested by police investigating the lead-up to the crash, which also killed 2 officers. And the US Treasury Secretary has announced the single greatest financial offensive ever against Iran. It's as President Trump is said to be making calls to world leaders with specific requests to cut their economic ties with Tehran. LBC weather dry for most tonight with clear spells, a risk of showers by dawn in the southwest, lows of 7 to 17.
This is LBC.
No, but what do you? How do you think we got to? No, but how do you think we got to this point? I mean, we're ultimately focusing on the fact that 2 police officers have been killed.
The consequences for stealing a car are not really strong enough. People should be banned for life from driving.
Sure, but I mean, in this case, I mean, the 5 people in the vehicle are all dead.
Yeah, well, that's too bad. I'm sorry about that. That doesn't right. They shouldn't have stolen a car in the first place.
Okay, well, I mean, we can probably go. I don't actually know if the car was stolen. I'll look into that. I'm looking at my producer to see whether the car was. I'm not entirely sure if it was stolen, but why?
And why were there 5 people in it? If they were working with a gang, why do you need 5 people?
Well, I don't. You're asking me. It had cloned plates. So I don't think we necessarily know if it was stolen, but you're asking me these questions, David. I mean, I don't know. I'm not Cleveland Police.
No, I know, but I want the answers to them because it doesn't make any sense otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll try and get them. We'll let you know when we do get them. Thanks, David, in Cheltenham. More calls in a moment. 0345 60 60 973. There are other stories, though. And around an hour ago, the US Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, launched what the Trump administration is called Operation Economic Outcast.
In the Second World War, D-Day marked the historic beginning of a campaign with our allies to target and drive the enemy from its positions, including those in third countries. Today, in that same spirit, we are launching an economic onslaught against Iran's financial connections around the globe. Our objective is to sever every economic lifeline that sustains this tyrannical regime until Tehran stands alone.
Negar Mortazavi is Senior Fellow of the Centre for the International Policy think tank, also host of the Iran podcast, who joins us from Washington, D.C. We've had this sort of sweeping campaign of sanctions and pressure outlaid, or certainly more details, more meat on the bone from Scott Bessent today. What do we learn, Negar?
Well, I think it's actually saw a former U.S. diplomat call it a nothing burger. That whole sort of announcement of a D-Day, which is very much reference to a big global war, that coming as an economic announcement on the, following a war, an actual war that has been launched and has failed to achieve any of its stated goals. It just does really seem like the nothing burger is a good description. I mean, is this going to put more economic pressure on Iran? Possibly. And who will pay the price for that? Ordinary Iranians. But will this bring the sort of surrender or capitulation, any policy change in Iran? I don't think so. As U.S. sanctions over the decades have not done that.
Well, and he says that the U.S. would sever all economic ties with Iran. I can't imagine there were many economic ties left between Tehran and DC.
No, there were no economic ties. I mean, the only sort of leverage that the U.S. has had over the years, well, the U.S., I mean, there's this joke running in Iranian policy circles that there's nothing left to sanction. In fact, there are sanctions that have been imposed on top of sanctions. The U.S. has double sanctioned entities and individuals in the past. And Iran has been able to tolerate and absorb that pain. Is it real pain? Yes. I mean, I want to be clear that this does impose economic pain. You talk to the average Iranian in Iran, inflation is very high, the prices are rapidly growing. But does that bring the kind of surrender, the capitulation President Trump wants? No. And I think he entered this war assuming this will be a fast and quick, easy win. He just hasn't achieved that. And now going back to the old playbook of economic pressure, hoping that that would bring the Iranians to their knees, I just don't think that's going to produce the kind of result he wants.
And what is the end goal here then? Is it to get the Strait of Hormuz open again? Or, I mean, what is a sort of realistic policy aim here?
I mean, I think that's a question for the administration because this war started without any real strategy.
Yeah.
For winning. And the goals were really grand from the beginning, right? I mean, this promised to be a regime change war. That was certainly part of the rhetoric of the Israelis, of the Americans. Then they promised that they have already destroyed their Navy, their Army, their Air Force, whereas the Iranians are still shooting back, and also destroying the nuclear program, which supposedly was already destroyed last year in Operation Midnight Hammer in the 12-day war in June 2025. And so why was this war launched? And now the war has created a whole new problem, which wasn't even a problem. It's now become a global problem, which is reopening the Strait of Hormuz that was open before February 27th. And also, I think this war, Iran, as the underdog in the war, has shown the limits of American power. Yes, U.S. and Israel have military supremacy, but military supremacy in itself is not enough. Iran has the advantage of geography. They are the home team. They're defending their homeland, so they're staying put, and just not losing for them is winning. And also, they have strategy. They have shown tremendous strategy step by step in the course of this war, which is very much lacking on the side of Washington. So U.S. has hard power, yes, but not everything is a nail that you can hit with a hammer.
And then lastly, just to get back onto sort of where we started, where Scott Bessent and indeed the Treasury Department have been focusing, I mean, this is against 5 sectors, as we understand: digital assets, technology, gold, aviation and shipping. And then tied to that, there's sanctions on vessels, individuals and sort of various entities. I think it's 60 in total across Iran. And again, noting what you've said in your first answer, if we look at those 5 particular sectors, though, I mean, why have they been targeted in particular? And could that affect, again, sort of hone Iran in to the point where they will have to give a little?
Well, first, your second question, the answer is I don't think so. I mean, all of these industries, these are major industries, right? So there isn't any new strategy or any new gotcha or founding. And all of these industries, every major industry in Iran has already been sanctioned. These are primary sanctions, which target the U.S., and also secondary sanctions, where the U.S. goes after other countries and entities and companies that do business with Iran. But also, Iran has mastered the art of resistance to these economic sanctions and pressure over the years. So yes, there is pain. They've been able to absorb the pain, like I said, but also they've figured out ways of somewhat going around sanctions. They have been able to sell oil at a lower rate, at a lower price, but nevertheless sell. And they've been able to sort of muddle through. I mean, this war has created a lot of economic pain, but is it to a point that it's not tolerable? No. And Iran's tolerance for pain, their threshold is actually very, very high compared to the U.S. that right here where I am, gas prices have been gradually going up and there's no tolerance. We see every poll shows majority of Americans are against the war because of the economic impact. And also the question is why? I mean, what is the point of it? Why is the U.S. public paying all this price? And it's not just gas prices, it's also U.S. blood and treasure. Billions of dollars is the cost of this war. Casualties and American service members. Now we're hearing of very bad conditions, supposedly even inhumane, on the, the carriers and the conditions that the U.S. service members are subjected to. And for a war that just seems very pointless, with no goal, with no aim, the U.S. is just muddling through for supposedly no reason.
Thank you very much, as always, for your time. That's Negar Mortzavi, who is a senior fellow for the Centre for International Policy, a think tank, and also host of the Iran podcast, joining us from Washington, D.C. Back to the subject with which we started the hour. Victoria says this is the crash, of course, if you're just joining us. 12 people now arrested in connection with a fatal collision. And I'm asking you, basically how we got to this point where people have no regard for the law, for police officers, for other people's safety. Victoria in Wokingham says it's laughable that people are calling in saying kids have no respect for the police these days, whereas they did in the past. I'm 53. I grew up on a council estate in Essex. Believe me, criminal gangs were very rife in recruiting kids in the 1970s and 80s. In those days, the threat of being sent to a Borstal-style young offenders detention centre where there was corporal punishment and it was still thought to be the ultimate deterrent. It didn't make any difference to the behaviour of kids who were being brought up with no parental control at home and were being excluded or expelled from school because the teachers didn't have the time or the resources to control them. It's amazing how people still see the past through rose-tinted glasses. Proper funding for education is the bottom line. If all of society, and if we want kids to stop growing up thinking criminal behaviour is okay, we want to prevent crimes occurring in the first place. It seems a no-brainer, but so many people, for some reason, still seem to think that dishing out harsher punishments after kids have committed the crime is the answer, says Victoria. Alev is in Islington. Hello, Alev.
Hiya, hi.
What do you think about this?
I think we have to really look at our family and how we've broken down as a society, because as parents we need to take more accountability for what our children are doing. So about 5 years ago, my son, at the time he was 14, I was single parent. He did not have a male role model in his life, unfortunately.
Right.
And he did try it on, because I'm a short thing. I'm only like 5'2", petite.
What do you mean try it on?
Like basically power. Boys get like that when they're teenagers. They try and see how powerful they can be.
I see, right.
And
trying to intimidate you to some extent.
Yeah. So it all started off with, I'm not going to my detention. So I was like, yes, you are. Then he stormed out the house. I was like, you walk out of this house, I'm calling the police. He didn't believe me. Called the police. An hour later, police brings him home, and the police were really good. Put my hat out to them.
Right,
really,
okay.
they really, really were like, you need to rein it in. Then after that, it was about 2, 3 in the morning. He wouldn't get off his Xbox. I was like, I tried to go in there, take the Xbox out of the room, and he literally tried to barricade me in the room until I gave his Xbox back to him.
Oh my goodness.
Now, a lot of parents in this country are scared of police and social services and them getting in trouble when it comes to disciplining teenagers.
Yeah.
I've told my son 3 times, I will chuck this Xbox out the window. He didn't listen to me, so I threw it out the window.
Oh,
yeah,
what?
he went ballistic. Yes, he went ballistic. Yeah, he hated me for it, but you cannot show teenagers.
You showed him who was boss after that.
Exactly. Now, the third time, my son had a curfew. He had to be home by 8 o'clock. I didn't care how old he was. That were my rules.
Oh, it was your curfew as opposed to anyone else's, right? I see. Yeah.
No, mine. So he had to be home by 8, and he could only go to certain places.
Right.
Now, it was gone by. Now, usually, if he was going to be home late, he would phone me and say, "Mom, I'm going to be home like 5-10 minutes maximum," but he would always let me know. It'd gone past
I love it. This is great.
It'd gone by it was about 8:45 in the evening, and I just got this random woman knock on my door and asked for my son, and then I was like, "Who are you?" And she just run off. And then, do you know what? I was like, no, I'm not doing this. So I called the police and I was like, look, I think my son, I think my son's up to no good. I said, I think he is hanging out with people he shouldn't be hanging out with. Cut long story short, when my son come home, I basically went mad at him. Where have you been? Blah. He only came home an hour late. Yeah?
Right.
But still, you have to be strict. You have to be strict and fair.
Yeah.
Okay? So I went mad at him, and in the end, I got it out of him that was the first night he was trying to sell drugs for a gang.
Oh, wow.
And then I called the police, and my son was begging me not to call the police. Even my brother was like, no, you're going to ruin his life. And I was like, no, because I am not going to be living. I will not have this. So the police picked him up.
Wow, that's fascinating. And so, was that the end of it after that?
Well,
the drug selling.
Yeah, that was the end of it, because when the police came around, they said to me, what would you like us to do? And the police were brilliant. They said to me, do you want us to take him in, keep him in for a night and show him really what the real deal is? And I went, yeah, please do that. He never, ever got in trouble again after that. However, my biggest problem after that, do you know who it was?
Go on.
Social services.
Oh, I thought you were going to say social media, but social services, right.
Because every time I was disciplining my son, and you do not have to hit a child to discipline them, yeah?
Yeah, of course.
My son would complain, and then social services would moan at me and say that I was too strict.
Oh, I see. Right.
And there's another really crazy thing in this
That's
country.
why I worry about smacking. You know, when people have this debate about whether smacking should be criminalised, I worry that parents would be penalised. I know it's not quite the same.
We don't have no rights left in this country as parents. Do you know that I was getting told off by the manager of social services because apparently I wasn't understanding my son?
Right.
Do you know, there's a crazy thing in this country, yeah? It's called being a young adult. When you come to a certain age, now this is how silly the law is in this country, yeah? Until the age of 18, legally, you are responsible for your child, yes? Mm-hmm. However, when they become a young adult, if they do not want to partake in certain services, i.e., get medication from the NHS,
yes,
or have procedures, they can refuse that, and as a parent you can't do anything about it.
I know. I've got to go because I'm way over time, Aliv, but lastly, how old's your son now?
My son is 21 now, and he's happy, healthy, and a good citizen.
You bought him an Xbox, or...?
No, do you know what?
He didn't need a replacement.
No, he saved his pocket money up for 6 months and bought a second-hand one, and he never, ever disrespected me like that again.
I love it. Well, you should see the messages coming in. Phil in Inverness, tell this lady she's an inspiration. Amanda, call her as a proper parent, thumbs up. Ed, great mum. Todd, more parents like this lady. Very good. More views in a moment. 0345 6060 973 and...
The former snooker world champion Graham Dott has been found guilty of sexually abusing 2 young children. I'm LBC's Alan Zazinski at the High Court in Glasgow.
A report from Alan next.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
Meghan and Harry are returning to the UK. So why are half the press absolutely furious?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
To sort of literally galvanise the troops. We'll get your thoughts on that after 8. First, though, we'll, as I said, we'll come back to your calls as well on the subject with which we started the show that's now seen 9 men, 3 women arrested. There's also 7 people, 2 police officers who've been killed when this Volkswagen Passat, pursued by the police, was driving the wrong way along a dual carriageway. But there are other stories, and as you heard me mention a few minutes ago, a world snooker champion has been found guilty of historical child sex abuse. Graham Dott, the 49-year-old, went on trial The allegations spanned between 1993 and 1996, involving a girl, and also later involving a boy. Alan Zazinski is LBC Scotland correspondent and has been covering this from the High Court in Glasgow and joins me live on the programme now. Alan, tell us more details of what happened from the High Court today.
Well, Graham Dott was found guilty on both charges that he faced. He was found guilty of sexually abusing 2 young children. And this is a man who, as you say, Henry, is a former world snooker champion. He was cheered in the Crucible. He was even commended in Parliament. Now he is a convicted paedophile in prison. And this has been a long time coming for his victims. You mentioned the word historical there. His first victim, the abuse against her took place between 1993 and 1996. She was just 9 years old when that began. A series of incidents that saw her inappropriately touched and Dott exposing himself. The second victim, it was a boy, a young schoolboy who was just 8 years old when the 4 years of abuse began against him. At least 7 occasions this happened to him. Again, inappropriate touching. He was also rewarded by the former sports star with fizzy drinks and sweets. You'll understand I can't go into the full details of exactly what happened, but during their compelling testimonies here at the High Court in Glasgow, the victims talked about being shocked, about being scarred, some comparing their symptoms indeed to PTSD. Such was the abuse that they suffered, and charities as well. The prosecutors here too described it as the worst kind of abuse. Dott himself, he had denied this. He was denying that all the way throughout the trial. He has never admitted to any of this, but the jury today decided he was lying, and indeed they have convicted him. He will be sentenced at the end of next month.
Alan, thank you for that. Alan Zazinski, LBC's Scotland correspondent. Those details, my goodness. And Alan gave us a flavour there. But in terms of the PTSD flashbacks as well, the man said he was gifted snacks and treats, including a £50 note as a reward strategy. And as a result, now has a diversion to Thai chili crisps, Iron Brew and Dove soap because of the association with Graham Dott. I mean, just the most appalling story. And a man, as Alan rightly points out, we were celebrating, of course, before we knew any of this. And when he was a world snooker champion, absolutely vile. Carol is in Dover. Hi, Carol.
Hiya.
Hello.
Hello. I felt compelled to call after listening to this on the radio, and my blood started to boil, so I thought I had to ring in.
Please.
I was a driving instructor for 15 years, and then I became a driving test examiner as well. And I also watched a documentary quite a few years ago where these scientists took 10 children, boys and girls, 5 boys, 5 girls, from different areas of the country, different ethnicities, etc., and they monitored their brains from 15 to 25, 4 times a year. And what they concluded was that girls' brains matured around 18, whereas boys' brains, not every boy, of course, but the majority of boys' brains didn't mature until at least 25 and beyond. And it meant that they had no understanding of consequences. So they just went off and did these stupid things because they just didn't think there was any consequences to it. And I find that incredible evidence. And, you know, as a driving instructor and as an examiner, I saw so many young boys come up with an attitude that was unbelievable.
Really?
And even on your driving test.
Particularly as a woman, do you think? Or because we also have a conversation about misogyny as well, don't we? And all, you know, everything that comes with that.
Well, there was some people that did not like the fact that I was a woman, but they, without being horrible, some of them were from different ethnicities who didn't like the fact that I was a woman and actually asked to have a man. But anyway, the boys would be speeding.
No, tough. You're stuck with Carol in Dover. Yeah, exactly.
No, exactly. And they'd be speeding on their tests. They'd be doing all sorts of stupid things.
Yeah.
And they just didn't understand why that was wrong. But on another prong for this is that we also used, as an examiner, we also used to have people come up for their test who were not the proper person. The driving licence they produced was not them.
Right.
They were taking tests for other people. And this happened probably 4, maybe 5 times a week in one test centre. And so these people were taking tests for other people who are now have got a licence and they're on the road and they don't know how to drive.
How worrying is that? My goodness. Carol, thank you so much for calling in on that. I'm just moving on because I've also got Paul in Worcester Park who's been hanging on the line. But thanks, Carol. Paul is in Worcester Park, as I say. Hi, Paul.
Yeah, hi there. Right, going back to this accident with this crash with the police, we won't call it an accident.
Yes.
I must admit, I blame, on the whole, a liberal attitude that's been prevailing for like the last probably 30, 40 years, in which people on like the left and the soft left tend to look at, and I'll use this term broadly, the working classes as either some form of noble savage or someone who's vulnerable, rather than looking at a large bunch of them who are just feral peasants, who always have been and who always will be. A large amount of humanity does not necessarily have a good nature. And we have to recognise that, and we have to treat people recognising that is the fact.
What does that look like then? I mean, what changed? Because as we heard earlier on from Victoria, who texted in, saying this idea that about kids going feral or getting in with the wrong crowd has been going on for years.
Well, yeah, it has, but so has like the slight shift to the left been going on for years. I mean, if you look at Victorian Britain, when the policeman, when the peeler was invented, or when the Wild West, when sheriffs and that went there, when punishments were harsh, crime dropped. Crime dropped hugely in Victorian England because people knew they were going to be punished, not necessarily caught, but if they were caught, punished. These young feral kids fear nothing these days.
Well, and the laws, I take your point on, Paul, to some extent, but also, I mean, does it come down to parenting and attitudes and the way that we pander to people as well?
Well, no, it does. The thing is, I'm 68, and I remember when I was in about my 30s bringing up my own kids, and I would look at some parents around about my age, a bit younger, bringing up their own kids. And I remember this discussion was had a lot between me and my friends who were going, my God, the way they're bringing up those kids, we have got a problem coming down the line. And those kids are now the parents of the kids who are causing these sort of problems. But also, and I just want to add another quick thing as well, the media is a lot to blame. Earlier on LBC, and I do love LBC, right, you had a woman on, okay, who was a friend of one of the 5 lads killed who laid flowers at the scene. And you let this idiot ramble on with her nonsense about what a lovely lad he was. He was a joy. He always had a smile on his face.
I didn't hear that, actually, I'll be honest. I haven't listened all day, but I take it on another programme. Right, OK.
Yeah, why do we allow that? That these people should be venerated?
Well, ultimately,
people should be ashamed to know them. Bring shame back in.
I take your point. Ultimately, look, it's a situation where this is... We don't have the full facts yet. I completely appreciate that there is... I mean, clearly... doesn't take, Poirot to work out that in a lot of these cases they're up to no good, these 5 individuals. But ultimately, we're trying to piece it together. But Paul, I do take your point. I'm grateful you called in. Thank you very much for all of your views on that. We are going to move on. Paul, you had the last word. I'm sure my colleagues will come back to this coming up.
We spoke a lot about brotherhood and togetherness and what we're trying to build. It's all talk until it actually happens, so I was glad that we could do that just to prove to people that was all true.
That's Dan Byrne, if you're scratching your head. 1 in 10 people in Britain feel anxious or self-conscious about their accent. Do you think the way you speak has held you back? We're talking about that after 9. Also,
I'm very sorry for him and for his family, but frankly, joining the Russian army in its war of aggression is an unbelievably stupid thing to do.
The normal Yorkshire lad who's died fighting for Russia. But first...
We need to go further together, I think, because there are some urgent problems that Ukraine is facing. There's also a need for financial support.
The Prime Minister speaks exclusively with LBC about Ukraine. You'll hear it next.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and...
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, the Prime Minister has exclusively told LBC on his trip to Ukraine that world leaders, including Donald Trump, need to do more to help Ukraine.
There are some urgent problems that Ukraine is facing. There is an urgent need for air defence support, and that's the big takeaway, if you like, from the meeting today. There's also a need for financial support.
Andy Burnham's also rejected the idea that Britain is on a path of confrontation with Moscow after the Kremlin claimed Britain is adding fuel to the flames of the conflict by helping the Ukrainians build their own missiles. Our political editor Natasha Clark is in Kyiv on Ukrainian Independence Day.
Really been struck by seeing ordinary Ukrainians just wandering around, trying to get on with their lives, trying to catch the bus. We just wandered down what's basically called their Oxford Street, seeing, westernised shops with sales.
Police investigating a crash on the wrong side of the A66 on Teesside say 4 of the 5 young men who died had 37 previous convictions between them. Their Volkswagen hit a patrol car, also killing 2 officers. 12 people have now been arrested over the crash, including 4 on suspicion of being an organised crime group. Detectives, though, say there's no evidence that the trip that day was being filmed for TikTok. Police commentator Graham Wethone says that update is important.
There's been a lot of posts I've seen on social media linking some of the occupants of the Passats to previous incidents where they've posted videos. For many, it's a natural assumption to think that this was the same sort of thing again, but clearly Cleveland police have identified there was criminal activity taking place, there was more than one vehicle involved, and that's why they've put that very important clarification out now.
The US Treasury Secretary has announced the single greatest financial offensive ever against Iran. It's as President Trump is said to be making calls to world leaders with specific requests to cut their economic ties with Tehran. Former world snooker champion Graham Dott has been found guilty of historical child sex abuse involving a boy and girl in Glasgow in the 90s and 2000s. Police have described him as a dangerous individual. And the family of Professor Jason Arday say his memoir will be published as planned on Thursday. He was found dead in South London days after resigning from Cambridge University over plagiarism allegations. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 37 points at 10,854. The pound buy is $1.36 and €1.17. LBC weather, dry for most tonight, a risk of showers by dawn in the southwest, lows of 7 to 17 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Henry Riley.
4 minutes after 8 is the time. Good evening to you. It's Henry Riley here on LBC. Now, talking about Ukraine this hour, and Britain and the United States need to go further in support of Ukraine, Andy Burnham has said, as he warns allies that they must share the burden. Do you think Andy Burnham and his ministers can persuade Donald Trump, can persuade the White House to care more about the plight of Ukraine? 0345 6060 973. All of this comes from an exclusive interview here at LBC. Andy Burnham signalling that the US, other allies, need to go further to support Ukraine. The Prime Minister spent the day in Kyiv meeting President Zelensky and convening the coalition of the willing. Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, has been there in Kyiv, speaking exclusively to the PM for us.
Good evening, Henry. Yes, it's been a pretty exciting day here in Kyiv. Obviously, Andy Burnham's first foreign trip on the world stage. Really his chance to show that he's not just all about domestic issues, but he can spread his wings and be that international statesman that we saw Keir Starmer be so effectively. And I caught up with Andy Burnham earlier this afternoon for an exclusive interview for LBC. And he explained to me why it was so important that he continues that support for Ukraine.
They're facing a tough winter. They need more domestic air defence systems. So I will go away with those calls ringing in my ears. There's more we need to do to dig in and support Ukraine. I chaired a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing today. I asked all of the countries on the call, and there were many on the call, to rally round Ukraine. 4.5 years into the conflict, the risk is that people start to drift away. Well, that wasn't the spirit in the room today. I was really pleased with the level of support for Ukraine. I take away the urgency of the situation, but hopefully they've heard the steadfast nature of our support.
He also told me that he was going to have conversations, including with Donald Trump, who needed to go further. He said we all need to go further to try to support Ukraine. He said he'll be going back to the United Kingdom with their demands ringing in his ears. So, of course, Donald Trump, the US president, slightly cooler on his support for Ukraine, at least publicly, and for the Ukrainian leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, who, of course, has been by Andy Burnham's side all day. During this day of celebrations, of course, it's Ukrainian Independence Day today, marking 35 years since they became an independent country. So a really happy day for many, but obviously bittersweet, tinged with sadness, because they are remembering so many of their fallen comrades who have been killed in this now 4.5 year long conflict. So Andy Burnham really trying to sort of tread that line, I think, between obviously domestic pressures back home and, of course, trying to be that statesman on the world stage. I asked him if he wanted to level with the British public that actually going further on Ukraine means putting Brits at home at risk.
Well, the risk, obviously, was to all of our security if we'd all just allowed Russia to do what it has done without supporting people here. That would have been the biggest risk, because then what would have happened next if we all did that? So I go right back to the start of the conflict. Previous prime ministers took a very firm position. They set the lead, but they were right to do so. And I applaud them for doing that. I supported them when they did that. And I just think it's very important that we show this continuity. Even though Britain has had some political change, our support for Ukraine is unwavering.
And obviously some other countries, including the US, have had some slight reservations about putting their blueprints for Ukraine. What conversations have you had with Donald Trump about doing the same for those Patriot missile systems? How will you persuade him that this fight is worth having?
Well, we do have close conversations with our US colleagues about the situation here, and we will continue to do that. They have provided funding, they have provided defensive support, and I think that will continue.
And you'll urge them to go further?
Well, we need to go further together, I think, because there are some urgent problems that Ukraine is facing. There is an urgent need for air defence support, so anti-ballistic missile support, and that's the big takeaway, if you like, from the meeting today. There's also a need for financial support, so we will do whatever we can to convene people to share that burden together, and we'll continue to provide steadfast support.
He also slapped down suggestions from Moscow that the United Kingdom is escalating. He said, we're helping Ukraine, we're not escalating this conflict. Some pretty strong words there, hitting back at some of the accusations that we've seen coming out of the Kremlin today. And of course, Henry, on the domestic front as well, the Prime Minister making news with LBC's interview as well. I asked him about the budget and whether that means that because of his hope agenda, his change agenda, all of the big things that he wants to do now he's Prime Minister, should Brits expect big tax rises in the autumn? Here was his response.
No, it doesn't mean that. We have a manifesto, and I will honour that manifesto. I do believe it's possible to provide extra help for people with the cost of living by changing some of our priorities, and I've indicated that around the moves I've made on VAT, on electricity, and we're removing that from October, reinstating the £2 cap on bus fares from January next year, and we've done that by reprioritising existing programmes, and I think the public would expect me to do that. Where I can help, where I can do something to take that little bit of pressure off, that is exactly what I will do.
Should we expect a big budget? Hopey, changey budget?
Obviously, people can see the challenging nature of the financial outlook, and we will approach it prudently and carefully, and we will always make sure that we put people's security first. You know, we won't take risks with people's finances or their pensions or their homes, but we will at the same time try and help with the cost of living, the cost of the basics that people are finding expensive. So we're working on that now, and we'll set it all out at the budget.
So pretty much ruling out any big major tax hikes there, Henry, I thought. Obviously, he doesn't completely rule it out because that would mean essentially no tax rises at all. He doesn't quite say that, but he does say that he's going to be sticking to the manifesto. So I think him trying to actually play down suggestions that this budget is going to be an incredibly big fiscal event, which is what I've been hearing from people in Number 10 and the Treasury over the last few weeks. And of course, the financial situation is going to be very, very difficult for him to try to play around with, Henry. We know that, you know, he's got a difficult set of circumstances and difficult choices to make. And he suggested to me essentially that he's already reprioritising things. He's already shifting around budgets, and essentially that is going to continue. Also on the domestic front, Henry, he suggested that Lords reform, House of Lords reform, is going to be coming forward at some point soon. He said everybody is very well aware of his position on the House of Lords. I mentioned that I've been reading his book. The Prime Minister co-wrote a book a couple of years ago with with one of the other Metro mayors at the time, Steve Rotherham, and I asked him, does this mean that House of Lords reform is coming?
I don't back away. I don't back away from any of it. Obviously there's a limit to what you can do in the period of time that I've got before the next election. It's on the cards still. There's a clear direction. I think we need to change the way the country works. We need to put more power out of Westminster down into all parts of the country, and Number 10 North is leading that change. And people shouldn't underestimate that. That is not a gimmick. That's a big change to the way we think about growth, the way the country functions. It is about doing elsewhere what we managed to achieve in Greater Manchester. So there's change coming. Hopefully it will be positive change.
Maybe one for after the next election.
Well, I'm well on the record in relation to laws reform, and I'm not going to change my views anytime soon. I think we do need a new politics in this country to make it work better for people.
So all in all, Henry, an absolutely jam-packed day here in Kyiv, the Prime Minister's first foreign trip. And actually, I thought that despite everything, he looked very, very comfortable on the world stage. Despite Keir Starmer obviously being incredibly comfortable doing this, I thought Andy Burnham seemed relaxed. He seemed chatty at times. Even by the end of the day, he was smiling. There were some really nice, intimate moments that we got to witness today. LBC obviously being given this exclusive access to the delegation here in Kyiv, and to see not only President Zelensky and his team close up, but of course Andy Burnham and all of the civil service team here as well. So really interesting and exciting to be there, and to see his little grinning face when some Ukrainian soldiers put on a very special performance of, some might say, an Oasis song for him, which was played on a version of a Ukrainian instrument, an electric version of this. He was absolutely grinning away and loved the Manchester connection. Lots of nice little touches for him today, and a beautiful city as well, might I say, Henry, for us all to experience today. And I think Andy Burnham will be going back with, like I say, not just the words from Ukraine's President Zelensky in his ear, but a lot more memories too.
Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, reporting from Kyiv, speaking exclusively with Andy Burnham. Your thoughts on that next. 0345 6060 973. Andy Burnham saying the UK and the US need to go further together to help Ukraine. But how do we get President Trump to care about helping Ukraine? Jeffrey Price is Senior Fellow of the Foreign Policy Institute at Johns Hopkins University in Maryland, also former Special Counsel for International Affairs at the US Department of Defense, who is regularly involved in negotiations between both Russia and Ukraine. So the perfect person to bring into the conversation on this. Jeffrey, thank you very much for joining us. Well, I'll ask you that question. Can you get President Trump to care about arming, helping Ukraine more than he's doing?
Well, we seem to have come to a new normal with the Trump administration and Ukraine, where the United States will continue to provide weapons so long as Europe pays for them. And President Trump has sort of said that he views this primarily as Europe's war. But the United States is continuing to provide some essential capabilities. Most essential is intelligence, and that continues to flow. And then there's a program called Pearl, where the United States provides weapons, but it's the financing of them is coming primarily from Europe. So I expect that to continue.
What did you make of what you heard from our Prime Minister there, and clearly very steadfast, like many of his predecessors, in terms of Ukraine?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he had it exactly right, and it's very encouraging to see certainly Britain be so steadfast and continuous. Conservative and Labour governments have been in the lead in supporting Ukraine and Europe, and in the lead in European security, and that, to my mind, is a very good thing.
We've seen today not just the meeting, but also the UK government handing over the blueprints for British-made components for that Scalp missile, which is, I understand, a French version of the UK's Storm Shadow cruise missile. Again, clearly the nature of what we are providing has changed, but how important is this latest step to actually allow Ukraine to manufacture some of those missiles?
I think strategically it's very important, and it's there's a bigger lesson here. You mentioned I was involved way back in the day in denuclearizing the former Soviet arsenal. Back in those days, Ukraine, went from being a substantial part of the Soviet military apparatus to kind of taking a holiday, and Ukraine is now resuming its role as a major player in defense, not just as one of the strongest militaries, the strongest military really in Europe, but also resuming its role as manufacturing weapons. So this capability, I think, together, Ukraine producing that is going to be strategically significant. And in part, it's a counterbalance to Russia's campaign of ballistic missile strikes, which it's increased this year and is probably going to increase even more over the winter.
You will know yourself the pressures on the cost of living, of course, because it is pertinent to your country. It's also pertinent over here as well. And whilst we have immense support for Ukraine on the whole, there is those who say, how long does this support go on for? How long does the sheer amount of money that we are spending on Ukraine and to President Zelensky, at what point does that stop? Now, I wondered if you could sort of spell out, in your view, the importance of when people are scratching their head and wondering what this is all for.
I mean, I think the Prime Minister got it exactly right. Russia is now a threat that it has not been in the past, and Russia is not going away. And it is far better to address that threat, farther out when it's in Ukraine than to have Ukraine be defeated and then face a resurgent, aggressive, threatening Russia closer to home. We faced that same problem, and I think, the British government sees it the same way. Russia is a significant threat to European security, and I think that investment is going to have to be made, one way or the other.
And lastly, I mean, I've had a message here from Suzanne, who's clearly a signed-up fan of mine, saying that you're out of line asking, can we get Trump, the US, to care more about Ukraine? The US has done and is doing much more with our tax dollars for Ukraine. Your clickbait rhetoric is disgusting. How would you respond to Suzanne?
Well, I think it is a threat to all of the West, what Russia is doing. I mean, the United States, I don't regret the aid that the United States has provided to Ukraine. I kind of wish we provided more in certain points in the previous administration.
Well, she's saying that you have done, and you've done so much for Ukraine compared with other countries. I just wonder what you'd say on that specific point to her, whether that is the case.
So the balance is being redrawn by the Trump administration. I personally think that it's a threat that is worth confronting, whether it's the United States, Europe, or all of us together. It's money well spent because this threat is not going away. So I certainly don't feel that what we've provided to Ukraine has been poorly spent. And let me just make one other point. Back in 1994, Ukraine had the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world. It gave that up. One of the reasons it was induced to give that up was security assurances that basically it would not be attacked. In a memorandum called the Budapest Memorandum. The United States signed that, Britain signed that, Russia signed that, and Ukraine signed that. Now, it's been violated by Russia. Okay, but when we let the international security system collapse or let it become threatened, we're going to face larger costs down the road. So I don't think either for Britain or for the United States that the money spent helping Ukraine to defend itself, which is the smallest part of this equation. The Ukrainians are paying with their lives, and we are providing what's a small amount of the American budget for defense or the British budget for defense to help them to confront what is really one of the greatest threats that the international system is facing today.
Thank you very much, as always, for your time. Jeffrey Price, Senior Fellow of the Foreign Policy Institute at Johns Hopkins University in Maryland, as you heard as well, a former Special Counsel for International Affairs at the US Department of Defense, regularly involved in many of those conversations between Russia and Ukraine. Jeffrey Price joining me there. Your calls in a moment, 0345 6060 973. Maybe you don't think President Trump has been a blockage, but if we reflect on that and how you can go about, if you want that to be the case, to go about taking the whole issue of Ukraine, perhaps putting it to the front of his mind more so than even other international conflicts, or indeed the situation at home when it comes to the United States. Is that possible? And also keen to take your reflections as well this hour on our support for Ukraine and whether you are as steadfast as you were those 4.5 years ago today as they mark their Independence Day. 0345 6060 973.
This is LBC.
He's done three real things on this visit. He's paved the way for Ukraine to build Storm Shadow missiles, which is not just about protecting itself for weeks now, it's years if they build them in Ukraine. Secondly, he's hosted this coalition, the Willing, which is 35 nations all together. And then thirdly, and probably most importantly, he stood side by side with President Zelensky on Independence Day, really reinforcing the right to self-determination and Ukrainian sovereignty, which is great leadership from Andy Burnham and the team that got him out there.
If we think about the good folk of Birmingham, Selly-Oak, but also across the whole of the UK, I mean, there was such support for Ukraine 4.5 years ago. I sense that hasn't waned in any sense, and people are still very supportive of Ukraine when there was that illegal invasion by Russia. However, there are those who are concerned about the price and in terms of the actual economic cost that support is costing us. I know you have very strong views on this. What would you say to those who are concerned by saying you can only spend £1 once?
Well, I mean, what I would say is that the second, third order effects of Russia's illegal invasion in Ukraine has absolutely put costs up, but not just in the UK, but across the world. And that's not going to stop until Russia ceases its sort of illegal activity. I mean, just think of the impact on grain and food prices because of the, stopping ports opening like out of Odessa. Ukraine's one of the biggest grain exporters. Think of the second, third order impacts on the world markets. It's been significant. I think sometimes that message isn't often registered here in the UK, that the inflation, the impact on food costs, the cost of living is directly impacted by Russia's illegal invasion. But to turn around and sue for peace immediately is definitely not the answer. We need to stand up for what we believe in, which is often ideas bigger than ourselves, like we have done for the last 100 years, First World War, Second World War, other conflicts where we stand up to protect those that perhaps need our help to maintain their sovereignty and right to self-determination.
Our political editor, Natasha Clark, has been with Andy Burnham in Kyiv, and the Prime Minister telling her that we need to go further, and we being the sort of collective West, and it was taken to be a gentle nudge to President Trump, to other allies to step up and do more. Is that sort of your view as well, Mr. Carnes?
I think 100%. The reason this conflict has gone for so long is because we have not necessarily collectively been assertive as we should have been early on. The UK has led way above and beyond any other nation, and lots of other nations have come in support of us, which I think is fantastic. But we've got to keep pushing. And that usually translates into resource, i.e. money, weapons, capabilities to allow the Ukrainians not just to defend themselves, but importantly defend us as well, because they're not just fighting for Ukraine, they're fighting for European security. And everybody needs to get behind that.
And what does that look like? Because, I mean, today we had the blueprints, as I was mentioning with my previous guest, about the Scalp missile, very similar to the Storm Shadow missiles. I know you know this, but I'm saying for the benefit mostly of me and listeners. And that sort of intelligence sharing, that blueprint sharing, and what we've seen in recent weeks and months with regards to drone technology as well. I mean, clearly the support is shifting and has changed. So I wonder, sort of bluntly, what more we can do, we should be doing.
I think it's more of the same, but it's increased levels of resource and components to enhance their drone battle on the front line. That's in short, medium and long range. And now you see the transfer of blueprints in things like Storm Shadow or Scalp, which will allow them to build Scalp at probably a faster rate than we could have, and therefore increase the intensity of the strikes on Russian military capability. And that's really, really important, because every time we have, military factories getting destroyed, whether it be inside Russia or indeed, within Ukraine, parts of Ukraine have been occupied by Russia, it reduces their ability to wage war on Ukraine and all those innocent civilians that are getting killed because of those, relentless drone strikes.
Al Carnes, thank you very much for joining us. How's your recess been? You've not been climbing Mount Everest again, have you? I remember you talking to Nick Ferrari.
I've had a very good recess. Spent time in the constituency, and then I've spent some time off putting some family credits in the bank as well, which is good before we get back and get at it in the next week.
Good. Are we missing the Ministry of Defence, Mr. Carnes?
Always. This is the first time, interestingly, I haven't been either on a pager or on call.
Of course.
For 19 years.
Right, so a bit of a welcome break.
So, people are saying you're missing it. Of course I miss it. I miss the wonderful people I work with, but on the same hand, it's the first time I haven't been on either immediate notice to move or on call for emergency.
Well, it's good to hear from you, and we're very grateful you came on. Thank you. That's Al Carnes, the Labour MP for Birmingham Selly-Oak, former Defence Minister, and of course he was a colonel and former officer within UK Special Forces. Jonathan's in Waltham Forest. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello, Henry.
Hello.
We've got stop following America. Whatever America doesn't like, we don't like. We need to we need to be brave and carve out a very different relationship with Russia. Russia is not our enemy. The issue between Ukraine and Russia is just that, their issue. It has nothing to do with us.
It's nothing to do with us.
Well, what has Ukraine got to do with our sovereignty and our security?
Well, it's right at the edge of our continent.
It has nothing to do with Great Britain's security. We just cannot.
What about the future of NATO?
Well, the future of NATO is in doubt because finally we're coming to a group of Americans after Trump that no longer see the need to keep going back to the Second World War as a reference point for the future. So it's.
But there's a difference, isn't there? I mean, are you coming at this of the point of view that what Russia have done is wrong, but nonetheless we haven't got the capability to do anything about it? Or are you coming at the point of view that Russia's right and they've been provoked? Because I think that's important.
Russia was provoked.
Oh,
Russia,
come on, Jonathan.
Can I explain? Well, Russia was provoked.
Right.
Vladimir Putin, for many years, warned the West, do not encroach upon their sovereignty, and you didn't listen.
But how? How did we encroach on our sovereignty? I mean, it's a bit rich for him to talk about encroaching on sovereignty, but how did the West do that?
Okay, let's put it another way. Let's supposing Scotland became independent, and they invited Russia and China military onto their soil.
Right.
Would that be acceptable?
What do you mean? No, of course not.
Right. Well, that's exactly why Ukraine is up in flames, because the NATO, which is the United States, decided that they wanted to bring Ukraine into NATO, which is unacceptable to the Russians.
Right. But Ukraine also was deciding it clearly, post-Soviet Union didn't want anything to do with Russia and Vladimir Putin, and hence why, I mean, people talk about eastward expansion of NATO. Why do you think ex-communist, ex-Soviet Union, I should say, countries want to be part of NATO when they're bordering Russia? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
No, it's not obvious.
It is obvious. Well, why are they wanting to join NATO then? It's all a plan to provoke Russia, is it?
Well, because the United States believes it's the supreme power on the planet and it can do whatever it wants. The United States promised not to expand NATO in the early 90s. It broke its promise.
Yeah, but also, if we're talking about broken promises, remember when we disarmed Ukraine in terms of its nuclear weapon, the Budapest Memorandum in the 1990s, 1994, I think it was.
That's another myth, Henry.
Oh, come on.
Those weapons were not Ukraine's in the first place. They belonged to Russia.
No, they weren't. No, they weren't. They were Soviet. They were originally Soviet, I grant you that, but they were very much of the territory of Ukraine. So let's not have this absolute baloney, Jonathan.
Well, it's not baloney. It's about understanding the facts.
John, I don't want to get into an argument with you, but do you never think, why am I so outnumbered on this when it comes to Ukraine? Am I possibly too sympathetic to Vladimir Putin?
I don't think when Burnham and Johnson and everybody else in between says the British people are behind Ukraine, I don't think the British people are behind Ukraine.
Well,
I think the British.
I measure it by opinion polls, and they
Oh
are.
No!
Oh, we don't believe opinion polls now either.
I think the government is behind Ukraine because the America is behind Ukraine, but the average person in this country couldn't care less. Right. It's not our war. It's not our conflict.
I mean, this is coming from Stephen, who sent us a number on WhatsApp saying, get this filth off the air. We wouldn't have been entertaining Nazi apologists when they invaded Poland.
Yes,
I mean, that's what he's calling you, a Nazi apologist.
That's right, because he doesn't want to hear the truth. Because we refused to dive a little bit deeper to understand why these things happen the way they happen. You know, I'm not suggesting for a second that Russia is all good, but I'm suggesting that we need to look at things a little bit deeper.
Right.
Than
my test always is, Jonathan, lastly, is when you've called in to defend, or as you would say, put a different perspective on this, can you criticise in any way Vladimir Putin and the Russian government? Or are they completely faultless?
I didn't say he was faultless or perfect. Right. I'm not saying he is an angel.
Can you bring yourself to criticise him?
About what exactly?
Well, about illegally invading. Whether you think he was provoked or not, which clearly you do, can you at least bring it within yourself to condemn illegally invading Ukraine 4.5 years ago?
No, I can't.
No, I didn't think so. Evidence of war crimes?
Great Britain supports Israel.
What the hell has that got to do with this? I'm asking about war crimes. But hold on, I'm asking about perceived war crimes by Ukraine.
You always seem to have a moral superiority when it comes to the world.
I don't.
Not see you personally,
right, okay,
but
fine.
you think that where you stand is, for instance, Tony Blair. Tony Blair is supposed to be in prison, but he's not. Right?
But Jonathan, I've just said that to you, sort of clutching for Tony Blair in Israel. I was asking if you can condemn Russian war crimes.
No, yes, after I condemn Israel and Tony Blair.
Right. Is there an answer that doesn't include Tony Blair in Israel? You've made that point. So specifically on Russia, what would you say?
What do you want me to say?
Well, you've made your point. You made your whole song and dance about Tony Blair in Israel, so that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That's been done. So now if we focus specifically on Vladimir Putin, will you condemn what many have seen to be perceived war crimes?
I don't see Vladimir Putin as the enemy of the world. I really don't. He is defending Russian territorial integrity. That's what he is doing.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think Jonathan there in Waltham Forest. News headlines. Daryl Jackson.
Andy Burnham's told LBC on a trip to Kyiv that Britain and its allies, including America, need to go further together to back Ukraine. He's chaired his first meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, which focused on anti-ballistic missile support. Police investigating a crash on the A66 on Teesside say 5 young men who died may have had links to organised crime. 2 police officers were also killed and 12 people have been arrested. Donald Trump's said to be making phone calls to world leaders with specific requests to cut their economic ties with Iran. The US Finance Minister Scott Bessent announced he'll target sectors including aviation, shipping and digital assets in a tightening of sanctions against Tehran. LBC weather dry for most tonight, a risk of showers by dawn in the southwest, lows of 7 to 17 degrees.
This is LBC.
Thousand of them, of Ukrainian children indoctrinated in Russia to hate the country of their birth. Very good point in terms of those perceived war crimes as well, the kidnapping of babies. And Lewis says, nice of Putin to call into LBC. Strange of him to start ranting on about Israel and Blair. Either he's a paid shill or some people really can't be helped. We've also had the destruction of cultural artefacts. We've had bombing civilian areas, the 30,000 people, children who've been kidnapped, torturing people. And we're talking about whether... I mean, do you ever think... Was it the Peep Show? Say, are we the bad guys here? I mean, you have to... I was a Mitchell and Webb, sorry. But yeah, same sort of thing. But you do have to sort of wonder it in this context, don't you? We're going to be talking later on this hour, by the way, as if by magic, by the normal Yorkshire lad who described himself as a normal Yorkshire lad. It's an LBC exclusive. He's become the first UK national to die fighting for Vladimir Putin's forces in Ukraine. Bradley Townsend left his home in Barnsley, South Yorkshire in April this year, telling his family he was going to Romania, according to a friend. They later discovered that the fisherman had travelled to Moscow, where he met other British pro-Russian fighters who recruited him online, it's reported, before signing a contract to fight on the Ukrainian front line, despite having no military experiences. Our reporter, Joseph Draper, who had that story, joins us later on this hour. First, though, Stephen's in Wimbledon, who I think is going to have a different view on this than Jonathan, our previous caller, because you've just come back from Ukraine, Stephen.
Yeah, I've been over there a few times now as, like, humanitarian. I support the soldiers, the families, the orphans.
I'm pretty sure we've spoken before about this, yeah. Or I've heard you on LBC talking about
yes.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on this trip, I actually met with an LBC friend, Ashton Cirillo, as well.
Ah, yes, so who's regularly on I've spoken to Ashton, but many of my colleagues have as well.
Yeah, but I think a separate Stephen, I'd like to add, called him a Nazi apologist, but he's not. He's a Putin apologist. Jonathan. He talks about NATO expansion, but it wasn't NATO expanding. This was countries that were looking for freedom and defence against Russia. And he said they promised not to move east, but there was no promise. He's on about a conversation once with James Baker and Mikhail Gorbachev where nothing was ever signed, no agreement was ever reached, and that conversation was actually about the fall of the Berlin Wall. So the guy was absolutely clueless what he was talking about. The second you asked him a question, he did what every
it's all
Russian
Tony Blair's
propagandist
fault.
does.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they switch straight away because they can't answer your questions, so then they go into the whataboutisms.
What would you have
And
asked
it's
him,
what about
Stephen?
Israel?
Because this is clearly something very close to you. I mean, what argument would you make to him if he's still listening now, Jonathan?
I'd push him more on the war crimes you spoke about, because, I mean, Russia are now in their hundreds of thousands, where, admittedly, Ukraine probably have done some, but I was looking at that today, and Ukraine are in the dozens of war crimes, whereas Ukraine are in the hundreds of thousands. And, I mean, there are videos circulating this week of Ukrainian civilians being targeted on cycles. And
really?
It's a sport for Russia.
Right.
Yeah, they're turning this conflict into a sport, some of their soldiers.
What made you go in the first place to help out?
Back in the day, back in February 22, I joined TikTok the day of the invasion.
Oh, right.
And
what, by coincidence or to learn more?
To learn more, actually. I didn't want to go to X. I mean, I am still on X, but I find that a bit of a cesspit. But with TikTok, they have stronger regulations about what can be said, what misinformation can be spread. And I just followed a couple of Scottish guys who were getting people out of the border. And I just carried on. I was helping a Ukrainian guy that was raising money for Ukraine, but we lost him in March last year. So I've kind of taken over the mantle of raising money for Ukraine.
Well, credit to you, Stephen, and thank you for all the work you do. I mean, I'm not trying to sound patronising. I mean, fair play, and I think it's such an important thing. And thank you very much for doing it, bluntly. Stephen there in Wimbledon. May's in Edmonton. Hello, May.
Hello there. I must say I agree with Jonathan, and part of what the caller had just said, I agree with partly that. I think it's only fair just to give an overall view as to maybe why Russia did what they did. Obviously, if Russia or any other country has committed war crimes, it's wrong. So I'm not apologising for Russia. But I think even if it was an informal, what they may call gentleman's agreement, there was an agreement to not expand. Now, a few months ago, you had some, I think it was Russian or Ukrainian people who rang up on your colleague, he comes on at 7, I've forgotten his name, and they were saying,
Ian
and
Dale,
this gentleman clearly said, that they feel that Ukraine is being used by Europe, America, and some of the European countries as a pawn to weaken Russia, that they don't really care about the people, but if they can keep this war going and it will weaken Russia. In my opinion, they should be looking at solving this peacefully. What is the issues? Can we solve it peacefully?
But
if Russia doesn't want NATO up against its borders, like America didn't want Russia to put a base in Cuba in 1962, why can't they respect that?
But if you go, let's go back to the Budapest Memorandum, right, in 1994, when there was this agreement between Ukraine, Russia, the US, and I think it was us, to basically ensure that Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal in exchange for those security assurances. And straight away from that was totally ignored by Russia.
But if they've made an agreement with Gorbachev, I was looking it up when it was 1994.
Yeah.
If they've said, you see, they can't be saying two things at once. They can't be saying, yes, we won't agree in expansion up to your borders, and yet at the same time telling Ukraine to give up their arms. They're using Ukraine.
They're not. Well,
they're using them as a pawn to weaken Russia, and I think we have to be.
But go back to 2014 then, when they invaded Crimea. I mean, the argument then was that the West basically sat by and did nothing and watched it happen.
But my understanding
Took part of
is
Georgia.
that I'm not an expert on it, and I'm just going by the things I've read and heard.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that a lot of people in the West, the east of Ukraine, are more supportive of Russian rule.
There's a very tiny proportion.
No, it's not a tiny, because I've also spoken to some people where they work at my gym.
There was a referendum, May,
There was
a referendum that was fixed basically by Russia, and it is you cannot.
This is not my understanding.
Let's not rely on the democratic. Well, hold on, you've just said that the east of Ukraine wants to be part of Russia, which is not true.
Some of the people feel that this is my understanding, was that there were Nazis who were ill-treating some of the people who were more Russian-speaking. So when Russia invaded, this is my understanding, that the people were quite happy. Now, I think that we just need to be open and honest and say, well, if America doesn't want Russia in its back door, and as the gentleman said, if Scotland got their independence and Russia decided to put
such a strange argument
there, they wouldn't like it. So I think it's only fair to say that rather than, I'm not saying Russia's always perfect, but I too believe at times that we are demonising them for maybe things that they don't need to be wholly demonised for. I'm not saying everything.
Mate, they are a country who have committed attacks on this soil in terms of grey zone warfare, spreading disinformation, but also, crucially, poisoning people. If you take Salisbury, for example, we had the embassy threatening to basically wipe us off the face of the earth last week after we supported Ukraine. They have no democracy.
Did they say to wipe you off? That wasn't their words, was it?
Well, no, but I mean, that was the implication, that the more we help, the more they'll attack us.
They did make a threat, but they didn't use those words.
All right, well, well, I mean, to be honest, I'm not going to second-guess Vladimir Putin and his intentions, but we also have a situation whereby the level of politics and democracy in Russia is severely lacking. You're either killed if you're a political opponent, or, as we saw last week, the leader of the only anti-war party was banged up in prison. I mean,
it may well be, but equally look at other countries,
you saying,
China, who they're doing business with. Russia, it's not only Russia. I'm not saying that they're perfect.
But they're on our doorstep.
I'm not saying that, they're perfect. But other countries as well. Look at what America, they went to Venezuela, took the president from his country, brought him to America. So, you know what, no country is perfect.
OK. Well, let's end that there, May. But look, I hope we had an interesting conversation in Edmonton. Thank you, May. More calls on that in a moment. 0345 6060 973. I'm getting too old for this. Coming up.
People should not be putting themselves in that position, and certainly shouldn't find themselves on that side of a conflict in which Ukraine and the people of Ukraine are fighting for the very freedom and democracy that we in this country cherish.
The Defence Secretary, Wes Streeting, speaking today with LBC about the death of a British man who travelled from his home in South Yorkshire to Russia to fight alongside Vladimir Putin's armed forces. The man was then killed by a Ukrainian drone strike. Details of this exclusive story for LBC next.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast with Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
Prime Minister Andy Burnham has arrived in Kyiv, the destination of his first foreign trip as Prime Minister. Given the threats that we are seeing from Russia, the boats that are coming up the channel, the planes that currently test UK airspace, I mean, is that indicative of a view that is more pro-Russian than we'd like to believe in this country? Luke Pollard is Defence Minister and Labour MP for Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport.
I've seen threats and attacks from Russia verbally over quite some time. They have this media operation that's designed to lower support for Ukraine, that's designed to create doubt in the eyes of their allies.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast with Tom Swarbrick. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
with regards to the normal working class lad from Yorkshire who went and has now been killed fighting for Russia against Ukraine. But first, John's in Hammersmith on Ukraine. Hello, John.
Hi.
Hello. What would you like to say?
Well, I'm not really sure I can follow the reform-supporting propeller heads that you've had on the show so far.
Well, I think they dispute that, but yes, go on.
Well, so let me give it a lash here. I am an ordinary Briton. I completely support our Prime Minister and his actions on Ukraine. I completely support the people of Ukraine and salute them for the epic struggle that they're involved in and their successes on the field of battle.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the Russian incursion was definitely illegal. And
legal or illegal?
Illegal.
Illegal. Goodness for that.
Illegal.
Right.
I beg your pardon.
Thought we were going to fall out. Yeah.
Definitely illegal, and they should be condemned at the highest level. I should point out that over the last week or so there have been explosions and fires in armaments factories in Italy, Estonia and Bulgaria. The Russian ambassador has left London over the last few days.
Whippy. Yeah.
So, well, yeah, but it's these are serious matters.
I know.
And we might we might look back in them and say, well, you know, remember when
the minister didn't seem that bothered this morning when I was listening to Luke Pollard on on Tom Salisbury's programme this week, and he was sort of saying, well, you know,
I don't think it's in our to our benefit that somebody at that level should be recalled.
Right.
But honestly, I think
I heard some of his interviews though. I don't think he was doing much good. But anyway,
I
do take your point.
Fairly closely, and I have to say that I can't see that we've made any serious errors, and Russia cannot win. And he's being put. Mr. Putin is being pushed into this by China, and North Korea is sending more troops. Supposedly up to 50,000. That was in the Telegraph today.
Was it? Right.
And Russia's next fake election, there should be 300,000 more troops coming out of that, plus North Korea's ballistic missiles. So it is escalating. It's unfortunate. It's a big you-know-what sandwich, and I think we're all going to get to take a bite soon.
Yeah.
But honestly, I can't say that we're in the wrong.
Thanks very much, John. Appreciate it. Just moving on for time reasons, but please, you had your say on that. John there in Hammersmith. More views in a moment. First, though, as I've mentioned a few times throughout the course of this hour, a self-proclaimed normal working-class lad from Yorkshire has been killed in Ukraine while fighting for Russia. He is believed to be the first British citizen to die fighting for Russia in the conflict. LBC's reporter Joseph Draper tells us more about the man, Bradley Townsend. Joe.
This man was just 33 years old. He had no military experience when he left his home in Barnsley, South Yorkshire, telling his family he was going to Romania. And the next time his loved ones heard from him, Bradley was actually in Moscow, where he was met by a tiny number of British fighters taking part in Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, or as he called it at the time, Henry, the special military operation. He saw himself, and this is in his own words, as defending Ukrainian separatists in the Donbass region, repaying the favour, he said, to the Ukrainian workers who donated their wages to Yorkshire miners in the 1980 strikes. And this was his message for his family in a video filmed in Moscow with British pro-Russian fighter Aidan Minnis.
My name's Bradley Townsend. I'm just a normal working class lad from Yorkshire. Well, I came with the idea that I probably won't be able to go home. It's definitely get persecuted if I went back. So.
And obviously with joining the Russian armed forces, you realise what that means and the danger that it involves and the sacrifice that you could potentially make.
Yeah, well, it is worrying. I'm not here for a suicide mission, but I understand that's what can happen.
And that is exactly what happened, Henry, 10 weeks later, when Townsend was killed on the front line near the eastern city of Liman by a Ukrainian remote-controlled FPV drone. That's according to a Russian military blogger. And this was the first time a British person had died fighting for Russia since the war began back in 2014. And we can see already how Putin's propagandists online are kind of seizing Townsend's death as ammunition, really, describing him as a warrior in a holy war against fascism. That is, of course, a common false trope used by the Russians to justify this war. Back at home in Barnsley, though, for those who knew Bradley, they've described him as an ordinary man, really, a good person even, someone who'd struggled with mental illness and addiction at various points throughout his life and who'd ultimately been brainwashed by sinister military recruiters. Now, we spoke to the Conservative MP and former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat earlier, and this is what he told us.
I mean, it's absolutely horrific. I'm very sorry for him and for his family, but frankly, joining the Russian army in its war of aggression is an unbelievably stupid thing to do. It's extremely misguided. And no question about it, it's criminal.
And the government said it is aware of his death, Henry. Here's what the Defence Secretary, Wes Streeting, told us at the Devonport Royal Navy base earlier.
People should not be putting themselves in that position and certainly shouldn't find themselves on that side of a conflict in which Ukraine and the people of Ukraine are fighting for the very freedom and democracy that we in this country cherish.
And the government's also said anyone tempted to go and fight for Putin will face potential legal consequences if they ever come back to the UK.
Joe, thank you very much for that. I note as well, I heard you earlier on talking to Simon Marks, who was on just before me, with regards to this Avengers this Britain becoming the first international partner who will get access to this Ukrainian database. And I wonder if you could just fill in people a little bit more as to what that means.
Yeah, well, this is, it's the latest announcement to come from Kyiv. The Prime Minister this afternoon, he was, of course, there with President Zelensky. He signed what he's called a groundbreaking Ukraine-UK AI partnership. Now, it gives Britain access to what's called the Avengers AI Lab, which sounds like something from a sci-fi film, really. It's essentially this huge kind of network, virtual web of real-world battlefield imagery, sensory data as well, which is all fed into training military AI. It involves thousands of cameras, infrared sensors. It captures images of tanks, troop movements, drones as well, all of that being used to develop the next generation of AI weaponry. And anyone interested in this to just look back at what the Ukrainians managed to achieve last year with Operation Spiderweb, Henry. You remember that when they launched kind of automated drones from the back of vans and lorries to target Russian military hardware well behind enemy lines. So they're incredibly sophisticated at this kind of technology. With this partnership now, we get access to that technology, to that lab that I've just mentioned. So it's very sophisticated technology, and it's another example, really, of this deepening defence partnership, which the Prime Minister has been outlining today in Kyiv.
Thank you, Joe. Joseph Draper, LBC's reporter, with that exclusive. Thanks for your calls on Ukraine. We're going to move on. Coming up,
the dental contract that they get from government to provide NHS care is very complex and doesn't reward them providing routine NHS dentistry.
How hard is it to find an NHS dentist where you live? We'll discuss. But first,
it never even entered my head that I sound anything that's not English. A guy stopped me. He said, "Hey, brother, tell your guy Zelensky we've got his back."
That's the comedian John Bishop. We're talking accents. 1 in 10 people in Britain feel anxious or self-conscious because of their accent. Do you think the way that you speak has held you back?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, Andy Burnham and Volodymyr Zelensky have signed a new agreement to allow British researchers and defence companies to use battlefield data from Ukraine to develop AI technology. The deal's been announced on the Prime Minister's trip to Kyiv, his first foreign visit since entering number 10. The UK has given Ukraine the blueprint for long-range missiles. LBC political editor Natasha Clark, who's accompanying Mr. Burnham, asked if he could persuade Donald Trump to do the same.
We do have close conversations with our US colleagues about the situation here, and we will continue to do that. They have provided funding, they have provided defensive support, and I think that will continue.
And you'll urge them to go further?
Well, we need to go further together, I think.
Jeffrey Price, a former special counsel for international affairs at the US Department of Defense, told LBC the US does need to face the threat.
When we let the internal international security system collapse or let it become threatened, we're going to face larger costs down the road. And we are providing what's a small amount of the American budget for defense or the British budget for defense to help them to confront what is really one of the greatest threats that the international system is facing today.
Police say they've arrested 12 people over alleged criminality in the lead-up to a deadly crash on Teesside. 2 police officers were among 7 people killed when a Volkswagen Passat, driving the wrong way along the A66, crashed into their marked car. Donald Trump's been phoning world leaders to persuade them to cut economic ties with Iran. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says new US sanctions aim to block all potential sources of Tehran's revenue. Negar Mortazavi is an Iranian-American journalist and told LBC the sanctions will achieve very little.
Is this going to put more economic pressure on Iran? Possibly. And who will pay the price for that? Ordinary Iranians. But will this bring the sort of surrender or capitulation, any policy change in Iran? I don't think so. U.S. sanctions over the decades have not done that.
And the fires destroyed more than 100 cars parked near Gatwick Airport. A 67-year-old man has been arrested and bailed. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 37 points at 10,854. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.17. LBC weather, dry for most tonight. A risk of showers by dawn in the southwest. Lows of between 7 and 17 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Henry Riley.
And a very good evening to you. 4 minutes after 9 is the time. You're listening to Henry Riley here on LBC. In for Ian Dale. I was with you last week. They're working me hard. I'm with you again all of this week, but with you till 10 o'clock tonight. Then Ben Kentish with you after that. We're going to talk accents this hour and whether you've changed your accent. And more specifically, I mean, it's all come from polling by the organisation More in Common, or sort of part of a larger group of research, that's found that 1 in 10 people in the UK feels anxious or is self-conscious because of their accent. I'd like to know from you this hour, has the way that you speak ever held you back, either professionally or socially? 0345 60 60 973. We're blessed with quite a few accents here on LBC. I mean, Lewis Goodall's got a sort of strange one because he is Brummie or ex-Brummie, and then it sort of some reports, I know when he goes back to Birmingham and reports, he sounds very Brummie, he sort of slips into it. I think Sheila's the same as well, to sort of go back into Scouse when she's speaking with family members and whatnot. But I mean, there are sort of are there a range of accents? There's all sort. I mean, we were speaking to Alan Zazinski earlier, our Scotland correspondent, so we do sort of cover various strands of the accent world on LBC, but far sort of less interesting to talk about us. Let's talk about you and whether you think your accent in any way has held you back. And I don't mean that, you weren't able to achieve your dream of being an astronaut, for example, but just that initial moment where someone interacts with you for the first time, whether they sort of almost jilt and whether they're taken aback slightly, and whether we do bluntly still have judgy views when it comes to people's accents. Are we still judgy when it comes to the way that someone talks? Let me tell you a bit more about this before we bring in Dr. Alex Bourata, who's an expert in this field. This polling says that many workers, I should say, still have experienced the so-called accent bias. The survey found 1 in 10 people in Britain feel anxious or self-conscious about their accent in high-stakes professional settings, for example. So it may mean that you're less likely to speak up in a business meeting or to contribute if there is a social event, which I find really sad, actually, in addition to clearly interesting, prompting our conversation. The research has been conducted by More in Common. They surveyed a range of people across England, Scotland and Wales and found that accent-related anxiety in work settings was the highest among Geordies. So the region around Newcastle, which always surprises me because Geordies, I think, have a lovely accent, but also wasn't there a period where they were, and still are, but there was sort of a rush to get them in call centres because they could tell you the worst news that your sort of bank had been hacked into, but they could say it in such a way, whereas you wouldn't necessarily, of course you'd mind, but it would sort of soften the blow if it came from a nice Geordie accent. So that's accent-related anxiety in work settings is the highest among Geordies, which is interesting. If you are a Geordie, given you are the highest, I'd really like to hear from you this hour, whether you think it has changed or held you back or perhaps closed certain doors which would have been open to you otherwise. And those with an East London or Cockney accent, apples and pears, at 19%, so pretty low accent anxiety, followed because they're quite confident Cockneys, aren't they? And people with a Welsh accent as well at 18%. 5% of responders, so 1 in 20, believe that their accent had cost them a promotion, a pay rise or a senior role. And Brumoys, people from Birmingham, I won't do that again, were, given there's a Brummie involved in the team tonight, were the most likely to feel this at 13%. And I won't go through all of them, I promise, but the only other thing that's worth noting as well is this poll commissioned by Common Ground has found that in particular fields as well, it's more telling, which I suppose would make sense, but particularly in those sort of well-paid sectors, this clearly seems to be a problem. And I wonder if it is a problem in terms of journalism as well, whether you still think that, I mean, let's talk about all different fields, but whether you do think, I think there has been this desire to diversify accents in this field and across many other fields, but clearly hasn't gone far enough when you have 1 in 10 people feeling anxious or self-conscious about their accent. Has this ever impacted you? Has it held you back professionally or socially? Has it, in terms of your job, ever changed the way that you have to do things? Are you embarrassed by your accent, bluntly? 0345 6060973. Dr. Alex Baratta is Reader in Language and Education at the University of Manchester and regularly helps us with these matters. I'm grateful, Dr. Baratta, as always, for your time. Are you surprised that there is this accent anxiety from many?
No, not at all, because it wouldn't exist if this wasn't a real issue. And I think accent bias, accent preference, I think everyone has it to some extent. But when it's applied to the workplace, then it becomes a serious issue because accent is not protected. Some of the things it can be a proxy for are protected, like race, national origin, and such. But class, which I think in Britain is very often the first thing people might try to pigeonhole you into, is not protected. So there are certainly examples in my own research and that of others where people in higher education and certain professions, law, banking, especially teaching, are being told things which, frankly, if you said it to someone on the basis of their national origin, you'd be in big trouble. But you can say it on the basis of accent.
Is it sort of self-fulfilling as well? Because I remember hearing there's one teacher at my school with a very thick Scottish accent, and I haven't got Scottish family. Obviously I knew what Scottish people sounded like, but I hadn't really been exposed to that accent before. And there's a sense that if you don't hear these accents in your everyday life and then you're confronted with them straight away after many years of not hearing them, it does sort of perpetuate, doesn't it? And I was in a case where I was sort of very confused by this Scottish accent that I'd heard, I remember, in primary school.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that if we're not exposed to certain accents, we're not going to understand them, perhaps, very well initially. But that should never be shorthand for someone saying, oh, I don't understand you, sorry. You know they do. They're just trying to have a go. Unless it's a joke and we can take a bit of banter if it's a mate, okay, fine. But I mean, in professions like, if you're a pilot and can't understand ATC or vice versa, air traffic control, then that can be an issue. I mean, I never heard a Philadelphia accent until I was in my 20s, and the guy I asked directions in Philly had to repeat himself. I did not understand a word he had said. That's not the same, though, as saying, I don't like your accent, or you sound thick, common, et cetera, et cetera.
It's interesting you say about teachers as well. If we sort of change and look at non-British accents, let's be honest, and I think you fall into this category, if you don't mind me saying, Dr. Baratta, is that similar as well? People who clearly have been born or grown up or spent time in other countries as well, still sort of having that bias, depending on where you're from?
I think it is. I mean, in the US, in Britain, I would say broadly it's about class. In the US, it's about race and ethnicity. Not to say there can't be some crossover between the two countries. And so I think very often in the US, you'll have things like, you're talking white and this kind of thing. And here it's, you're talking common and everything in between. But I think every country certainly has this. My wife's Korean, and in Korea, the standard accent is Seoul. No surprise, it's the capital. Whereas Busan in the southeast is usually portrayed as someone who has a nice heart, but a bit slow. And in, Parisian French is the standard, whereas in Marseille, you're portrayed as simple. But they have la glottophobie in France. So actually addressing accent bias. So there's nothing unique to Britain, but I think in Britain it might be more about the class issue first before we then break down into other categories.
Why do some accents get certain connotations? I was saying earlier on that people view the Geordie accent as quite trustworthy, for example. How do these sort of connotations get affixed to an accent?
Well, I think it's all about stereotypes. We don't really hear sounds, we hear stereotypes. And if the stereotypes of a given city, region, national origin, race, ethnicity are good or bad, that'll be ascribed to the accent. People may disagree. Yeah. They'll say, the Scouse accent sounds congested. And people have said it's a mixture of Irish and Qatar. They're being ironic. Otherwise, they wouldn't get published. Like this, the K sound becomes a H, a strong H.
Yes.
So I'll be back, and Czech. Now,
yes.
Oh, that's the problem. They'll say that's a linguistic culprit. But hear the same sound in German. It sounds commanding, like Gute Nacht. Hear it in Spanish. Jamón, well, it sounds sexy, right? Because it's Spanish. So what's going on here? And Glaswegians who say loch, they tend to be middle class. They're judged more favorably. The working class tend to say loch. So we're very fickle. It's not sounds or sound symbolism. It's the stereotypes.
Right.
So, inner city region, there might be a lot of crime. Not saying Liverpool, just pick an inner city anywhere in the world. The accent then becomes a proxy for the negativity or the positivity. But that's social reality. Linguistic reality is that we all have the same vocal apparatus, and the sounds we produce say nothing about our intelligence or lack thereof or friendliness and such.
Of course, we would have had accents, forever, really. I mean, you all know more about the history than I. And so this idea that you would say... I suppose what I'm getting at is, will we ever get to a point, and it's a struggle that we haven't got to this point already, but particularly as we have, media and people are more exposed to accents, we're a more interconnected world, does it then follow that accent bias, that accent, in some cases, prejudice is phased out?
I think somewhat, because the BBC used to be synonymous with RP, but now in the BBC you can hear newscasters with a wide variety of regional British accents. However, they're more general varieties. They're not the more broad varieties. If they're broad, then in sometimes just one word where the person is from. A more general variety, you have a lot in Britain, I've noticed, where people say after 10 minutes, wait a second, are you from Liverpool, Birmingham? Yes. It takes time because you're dropping those features, whether it's the Liverpool... I'll be back, or the Yorkshire baby, this kind of thing. I'm not trying to take the mick out of anybody. I'm just giving some examples. No. I hope it's offended.
Well, no, I don't think you've been cancelled, Doctor. Thank you very much for joining us. Always good to talk with you, particularly in the subject as well, so thank you. That's Dr. Alex Baratta, who's a reader in language and education at the University of Manchester. You're already calling in on this, but... I just go back to, if you're just joining us, that sort of key question. And look, I obviously I'm someone who uses their voice for a living, right? So I don't think my accents necessarily hold me back. You probably hate the sort of way I sound, but it's what's the thing about people not being able to listen to themselves back? I can't listen to the sound of my own voice, which is ironic being a radio presenter, but I just really struggle with that. But I mean, that's sort of out of the question, isn't it? But has the way you speak ever held you back professionally, socially, or in some other way? 0345 6060 973.
This is LBC.
about
Right.
bias, because I think sometimes people do kind of think that it's only towards maybe a more like northern accent or, you know, something other than a neutral accent, but I think it can work ways, definitely.
So where are you from originally?
I would say South Yorkshire, because I grew up most of my life in a mining town, which is called Harworth.
But where were you born then?
Born in Hammersmith.
Right, around the corner from me. Right, okay.
In West London, yeah.
Yeah, right. And so the people, the good folk of Doncaster and Yorkshire generally, or South Yorkshire specifically, did they... how can I phrase this? Were you considered a bit of an outsider because of your accent? Like you're
Definitely.
a bit... she's a posho, basically.
Definitely. So I actually grew up. So when I was like hanging out with my friends, my accent does change. But like in order, because I'm severely dyslexic, so in order to spell correctly, I've had to teach myself to speak in a certain way. So I think because of that, like growing up, training myself in that way, I've kind of acted this accent. I don't know. Yeah.
And I wonder, in terms of your work, has it had an impact?
Yeah, definitely. So I work in the public sector, and it's a very much like working class kind of environment where I work, and I feel that I've kind of been not sidelined, but I've kind of been maybe looked down on a little bit because of my accent and because I'm not one of the, you know.
Right, okay. Oh, that's interesting.
It is, yeah.
And do you think it's something that is becoming less of a problem now? Because I wonder if you, whilst you're not going to sort of put on a fake Yorkshire accent, have you changed the way you say certain things?
When I'm out and about, like in villages or in local areas, I do emphasise certain words.
Right. And that's not to fit in, that's just natural.
To communicate, better, to connect,
Oh, fascinating. Thanks so much for calling in, Anna, and great to have you as a first-time caller. Make sure you call again, and soon. Anna, a first-time caller there in Doncaster. Donnie's in Gairloch in the Scottish Highlands. Hi, Donnie.
Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, good to hear from you, sir. What did you want to say?
I heard you saying earlier on that you had a Scottish teacher and you couldn't understand his thick Scottish accent.
No, as in I was not used to it. As in I was sort of semi-taken back because I don't think I'd heard a Scottish accent.
Are you from?
Oh, hello?
Which part of the United Kingdom were you from?
Where do you think?
I haven't a clue.
Right. You're seriously telling me you can't hear the difference between various accents?
I can understand you perfectly.
Yeah, I can understand you perfectly, but I struggled with Mr. Edgar.
Where was he from?
I can't remember now. It was a long time ago. It was about 25 years ago.
Oh, well, 15, 25 is a big jump.
Yeah. Well,
I'm about the credibility of your story.
Donnie, what the hell is going on with you? You've woken up on the wrong side of the bed today.
No, I didn't. But you're telling me I did.
Right. Why are you so angry about this? I was just... I love the Scottish accent. I was just basically saying that I hadn't...
I'm not angry. You're telling me I am.
OK, well, I apologise for that then. But I was making the point that...
I don't mind, but you couldn't
talking over me.
You said you could not understand them.
Right. Well,
some parts of Scotland speak what's known as the best King's English.
Yes.
Especially in Inverness-shire. You know, there's so many different dialects in England, all over England. So, you know, I couldn't understand what you were saying. You could not understand his thick Scottish accent.
You said that a few times now, and let me clarify then. So the point I was making was that I had not been exposed to a Scottish accent or heard many Scottish accents, let's say. And there are clearly different accents depending on all of the different corners of the United Kingdom. And he happens to have a particularly thick accent. I mean, I'm not lying to you, Donnie. I'm telling you the truth.
I haven't a clue what a thick accent is.
Oh, God. Well, something that I found hard to understand. I mean, use your bloody noggin. Something that I found hard to understand.
Okay, wait a minute. Don't get bullish.
Well, you're the one who's called up having a right old pop at me. I mean, it was a pretty innocuous comment, to be honest, Donnie.
Yeah. Over me if you want. Why not? That's when you're losing the battle, mate. Listen, with
what do you mean? I haven't said anything.
But the rest of your class struggling with this gentleman's accent.
Sorry, I can't remember. I was in primary school, Donny.
25 years ago, yeah.
What? Yeah. Well, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, nothing.
I'm 29 years old, Donny, so you do the maths.
I think you are speaking quite a large part of horse shit.
OK, well, we can't have that. Thanks very much, Donny. You sound like a charming man, so thank you. Donny there in Gairloch. Any final thoughts? No. All right, thank you. Wow, that escalated. We're only having a conversation about accents. Wow. I don't think Donny will be calling me again. Eva is in Wimbledon. Oh, lovely. Hello, Eva. You won't shout at me, the good folk of Wimbledon.
Hello, Henry.
Hello.
I found that, I don't know, hilarious or just devastating.
Not welcome in Scotland anytime soon. Let's hope there's not many games at the next Euros there. Crikey.
Can I also tell you, my son's name is Henry.
What a brilliant name. After me? You didn't have to do that. That's so kind of you.
No, he was after a stuffed
Henry
duck
Cooper.
that I had.
A stuffed what?
A stuffed duck, toy duck.
Right. Well, that's
But
interesting. Anyway, right. You're from the lovely southwest London part of Wimbledon. Very nice.
Right,
has your accent held you back?
Listen, I was born in Poland. My father was a naval man. We travelled with him. I came to England at the age of about 3.5 from Pakistan, where I learned how to speak English.
Right.
And
wow.
I came here speaking with a really thick Pakistani accent.
Really?
Which, thankfully, I lost. Because, at the school I went to like a Catholic convent school, and they taught us elocution. And so that got knocked out of me.
But does it come back when you speak to family members? Or I suppose you're speaking in a different language, I appreciate. But,
No, I speak Polish, but I tell you something. I went to Wales with a friend of mine for the weekend. Didn't understand a word anybody was saying to me.
Careful, Donny might be calling you up and shouting at you.
Okay, but I came back to London with a Welsh lilt. Can you believe that?
Well, what were you saying that was Welsh then? You were sort of offering everyone...
No, I just
Welsh
started...
cakes, were you?
Yeah, I don't know. I just, you pick up accents, when you hear different voices, you pick up accents.
Yes.
And then you know what? I was working in a community centre, and the bingo caller dropped dead, and I had to do the bingo calling.
Oh, what? Sorry, wasn't he actually died?
Yeah, he died. He died in the toilet.
Why did they continue with the bingo? I mean, the poor bloke's dead.
No. I had to take over from him.
What, that night?
You know what? Continuously.
Why didn't they cancel the bingo if he's just died, the poor man? What?
I had to do it continuously. And you know what? All the people there, all the people there were saying...
This is mad.
But, and I was trying to...
Wimbledon?
The Wimbledon Community Centre, which doesn't exist anymore.
Get down there tomorrow morning and start a protest. This is outrageous.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, okay.
It closed down.
Was it Witherspoons now or something? Right, okay.
It closed down in 2012.
Okay, all right.
And, but, all the people there were saying, I was trying to articulate, 22, whatever, ducks or whatever it was, And what I heard was, I don't understand a word she's saying. She's so posh.
People were just shouting bingo. Bingo!
She was saying, she's so posh, I don't understand a word she's saying. And, ever since I've been called a posh bird. And I came to England with a Pakistani accent. There you go.
Fantastic. Well, great to hear from you, Eva. Thank you for not shouting at me either. Eva there in Wimbledon, 54, clean the floor, is it? I can't think of any other bingo ones. 55. Two fat ladies, 88. Yeah, that's the only other one I know. Thanks, Eva. Appreciate it. I do think it's a bit harsh replacing the guy doing the bingo, though, straight away. The show must go on and all that, but, I mean, come on. I'm still struggling to get over Donny as well. I don't really understand why I rubbed him up the wrong way. Good point here, who says, Carol in Glasgow, thank you for coming. Geez, what an absolute defensive something Donny is, and I'm a Scottish lass, lol. And Louise says, I think Donny might have misinterpreted thick to not academic rather than thick accent / strong broad accent. Oh, no, I was meaning stupid. And no, I wasn't. I was meaning thick accent. And Joe says, this must be the most absurd call I've ever heard. Crikey, Donny. And Ruth says, calm down, Donny, we can hear you. Not suited to a public call centre. Well, you said it, not me. Ranjit is in Oldbury. Hi, Ranjit. I know your accent. Hi, Ranjit.
Hi, mate. How you doing?
Well,
okay?
I'm a bit annoyed at you, actually, because yesterday we did a whole segment on the price of fish and chips, and you didn't call in.
Well, Sunday afternoons is when I go to the pub, and I have a few drinks, and then I'm not fit enough to call you because
right.
You say you've had too many sherbets.
It explains so much. How much is a fish and chips at your place in Oldbury?
Oh, £13, mate. That's still cheap for the size of the fish. Yeah, that is cheap. I mean,
anyway, less about the fish and chips, more about the accents.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just don't go to Scotland, especially Inverness-shire. Yeah. Okay, that's you. Yeah, my accent, because I've got a distinctive kind of a Brummie accent. But I used to be a delivery driver. If I went to Birmingham, they would think I was from the Black Country and call me a yam yam. Right, and when I went to the Black Country, Dudley
what does that mean?
Yeah, that's what they call the people, yam yam. That's what they call them. The Brummies call them yam yam, and then the yam yams call it. Yeah, so I'm in the middle towards by West Bromwich. Yeah. Now the thing is, when you're too young for this, Henry, because there used to be a program called Off Weed and Same Pet.
Oh, I know Off Weed and Same Pet. I haven't watched many of them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and they had the bloke Barry Timothy, of what his surname now. He was the Brummie guy. Paul, yeah, and he was really, he played a thick bloke, really thick, right? So when we go and like years ago, I used to be a market trader. So when I went down to Breen or places like that, Bristol, they used to pick my accent out straight away. But the lady you used to have who learned her English in Pakistan, Eva.
Yeah.
My story is quite similar because I was born in Britain, but when I was 7, my dad took us to India and we was never going to come back. So I went to Punjabi school.
Right.
And for 2 years, and I totally forgot how to speak English. When I was 9, I come back to England and I had to sit with the immigrant children and learn how to speak English again. So I don't think I've done that bad with my English, but my accent, I'm proud of me. I never want to lose my accent. But when I went to Canada, they thought I was Australian. I thought
you're Australian.
Mate, I'm from Australia.
Yeah. Did you play along with it?
I just played along with it. I was there 5
Canberra.
weeks, so I just they didn't ask me where I was from. They just said, "You're from Australia?" I said, "Yeah," that was it. But I couldn't make a house call, could I? Because my voice would be recognised straight away. And what did you learn from the fish and chip trade yesterday? What was
just that it's really expensive, and I think the price was $6.50 15 years ago on average, and now it's like you're talking 16 quid in some area. I mean, you're very reasonably priced at $13.50.
Yeah, but it depends, Henry, on
45 for a family of 4, apparently.
Yeah, no, it's very expensive.
You're pricing people out, Ranjit.
If you went to Stourbridge, you're looking at £18, £19
what?
for fish and chips now.
Really?
Yeah, it's an affluent area as well. You've got to look at the demographic of where you're trading.
Yeah.
The price of fish, oil, energy, all your foods are going to go up now. Yeah.
Cooking oil, expensive. Yeah, I've got it. I'm determined to try one with beef dripping as well, where the chips are cooked in beef dripping, but I'm yet to find one yet. Thanks, Ranjit, as always, in Oldbury. More calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973. If you're Scottish, shout at me. If you're not, call in and talk to me about accents. Still to come, we will be talking about... Wow, we're going to get there in a minute. Let's edit that bit out. Still to come.
600 practices have stopped providing what's known as general NHS dentistry since 2017, and practices without an NHS contract have grown by about 1,000.
The man behind the glass did not understand my accent, clearly. That falls, and indeed that fall represents 1 in every 10 dental practices which were offering NHS care in 2017, now no longer doing so. What needs to be done to reverse this and make it possible to see an NHS dentist? Your thoughts on that next. But I do want you to still call in about accents. 0345 6060 973. Slightly late to the news headlines, Daryl Jackson.
Andy Burnham's told LBC on a trip to Kyiv that Britain and its allies, including America, need to go further together to back Ukraine. He's chaired his first meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, which focused on anti-ballistic missile support. Police say 5 young men who died after their vehicle was driven on the wrong side of the A66 on Teesside may have had links to organised criminal activity. 12 people have been arrested by police investigating the lead-up to the crash, which also killed 2 officers. And the US Treasury Secretary's announced the single greatest financial offensive ever against Iran. It's as President Trump is said to be making calls to world leaders with specific requests to cut their economic ties with Tehran. LBC weather, dry for most tonight, a risk of showers by dawn in the southwest, lows of between 7 and 17 degrees.
This is LBC.
Not the way where you come from, it's how you sound, like me. People say I sound white, but I'm a black lady, Henry.
Right. As your accent...
I was a white lady, wouldn't you, Henry, the way I sound?
Right. Well, thank you so much for that call, Jean. Really appreciate it. Jean there in Chingford. I don't know if we're... Yeah. Alex is in Hornchurch. Hi, Alex.
Hello, Henry. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you, sir. Where are you from, then?
Oh, you know where I'm from. We met at the Havering Count. I'm Alex Sibley. I'm the councillor.
You're a Reform UK councillor on Romford, not Romford, it is in Romford, Havering Council.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, when I'm working, I lose my Essex accent completely. Because,
yeah, you're all posho.
Yeah, because I've always found that, I don't know, let me do how I normally talk. If I talk like this, people don't ever take you seriously because they think that, oh, he's an Essex boy. He don't know he's from his elbow. But then I have learned to enunciate perfectly. So, of course, when you're talking to people and you want to get your point across, you make sure you get rid of your accent completely.
And, yeah, I mean, you had a bit of a career before politics as well, didn't you? On TV,
call it a career.
When you were on the Big Brother house, in the Big Brother house.
But and they did, and it was the first time I'd ever known about my accent, and people said, "Oh, he's a whiny little Essex boy. The way he talks, oh my God, I can't listen to that anymore." And I used to hear that all the time. And when I used to listen to myself, I used to think, "Oh my God, I really sound like that." So there is definitely something about accents, that's for sure.
And of course, your area is a bit of a debate as to whether it is Essex or East London, but let's not get into that. But where do you, with the accent you've got, what connotations do you think people associate with that voice, that accent?
Well, the proper Essex accent, I think they all think it's to do with The Only Way is Essex. And I know everybody knows that the people on The Only Way is Essex aren't renowned for their... a terrible way to say it, IQ, in a way. So
really?
I think there is... Well, yeah. I think Essex has got an accent that it doesn't always sound smart. You know, you can have like a Liverpudlian accent or from Manchester, but those are regional, and I think people accept a regional accent. But for things like Essex, and I don't know, it just I'm allowed to say it because I'm an Essex boy, but I don't know, sometimes I hear him, we do sound a bit stupid. There's no Essex boy.
You said
no Essex boy newsreaders, are there?
I think there are. I'm trying to think now. I'll have a think. But I'm not going to concur with your point on that because I enjoy my job. And I'm also happen to be stepping out with someone who's from Essex. Alex, good to hear from you as always. Hope the job's going well. Alex there, who's in Hornchurch and is also a councillor in that area as well. Moving on, because there are other stories we need to cover. And how hard is it to find an NHS dentist? Data analysed by the Nuffield Trust has found there are nearly 600 practices in England that have withdrawn from NHS dentistry over the last 10 years. The decline has been particularly sharp in parts of south-west England and indeed the east, raising concerns about growing inequalities in access to care. I think I heard earlier on someone make the point that the main reason why children go into A&E these days is because of rotting teeth or tooth decay. Mark Jones is founder of the Toothless in England campaign group, which calls for everyone to have access to an NHS dentist. Thanks for joining us, Mark. I mean, we already have a two-tier system, really, when it comes to dentistry. Are you 100% sure that it can be reversed?
Well, that's a very good question, Henry. Great to be with you again. Toothless in England has been campaigning for just over 5 years now, as your introduction stated, demanding an NHS dentist for everyone. That looks as though it's not coming any closer to fruition, it has to be said, from this latest report. And more people across the country are finding it almost impossible to get an NHS dentist. And when practices drop out of providing NHS oral health care, patients are left with nowhere to turn. And
well, some make a loss, I was hearing today as well.
Private fees, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The contract that was brought in 2006, much against a lot of opposition from the profession, really turned on its head the way in which funding was provided and how it was handed to the practitioners, giving us all an NHS dentist to go to. And in the years since, twice now, the Health and Social Care Committee has deemed that contract unfit for purpose. I don't know quite what it is that the government is not hearing. These are their own party members and obviously opposition members of Parliament as well, doing, very thorough investigations into NHS dentistry and finding that it's just completely broken. And that's where we are today.
I'm not saying that I like this idea, but there will be those saying, for those who clearly can't afford it, then absolutely fair enough. But for those who can, should dentistry really be a sort of NHS universal right, part of the NHS?
Yeah, well, I think, the question is a very good one. I think if you're in so much pain that you're having to resort to doing your own surgery...
That's true.
I think, there comes a point where, what are you going to do? Where is it going to end? Are you going to cut your own leg off if you've got an infection and you can't go to the NHS isn't going to provide for you? What we're seeing here, Henry, and your listeners probably won't need reminding of this, but we're seeing children in real pain. They're missing school and sometimes ending up in hospital for tooth decay that should have never have got that far. Us adults are living with ongoing infections and constant discomfort. And I know there are many out there that are missing work or trying to work while distracted by pain. And of course, that has its own risks, of course, in the workplace. And some, as we know, are resorting to DIY dentistry because they feel they have no other option. And worryingly, Henry, I think, well, for me, this really strikes both for myself and my family. Worryingly, there's a risk that mouth cancer is being missed simply because people can't get their checkup. There isn't there isn't a shortage of dentists. That's one of the other things that's bounded about. Oh, we need more dentists. Well, there's plenty of dentists knocking around. They're just choosing not to provide care under the NHS contract because it's financially unviable.
They need to be incentivised to do so. Mark, always good to speak with you. Thank you for joining us. That's Mark Jones, who's founder of Toothless in England, which is a campaign group. It calls for everyone to have access to an NHS dentist. You might have views on dentistry, by the way, and how hard it is in your area. Maybe you live in one of these dental deserts where it's virtually impossible as a new patient to get enrolled and get NHS dentistry if you want to. 0345 6060 973. But it's accents that's got you talking. We'll cross over to Los Angeles to speak with somebody who's born in Romania next.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
As Andy Burnham goes even further in helping Ukraine to bomb Russia, Putin plots his revenge on us. Is our support for Zelensky worth it? Plus the young people risking their lives for infamy on TikTok.
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Froze. I mean, that is quite something, isn't it? I absolutely froze and said nothing. So, yeah, accents, it's a big problem when you come across different people. And also when I was working in Ireland, I've been here 27 years. When I was first working in Dublin, two of our women used to come in, probably in their 70s. They were sisters, and they kept asking what part of Australia I was from. So there you go. Valerie says, I was called pretentious when I was on a call. Oh, OK, right. I don't think you're pretentious, Valerie. And says, James Whale said, I've got an interesting accent. Oh, James Whale. Half Scottish and kind of Cockney. And Dino in Northampton says, I'm from Corby in Northamptonshire. It is known as Little Scotland, although it's in England. I've soon relocated in. The amount of people who say, what part of Scotland are you from? I've never been to Scotland. Really? So people from Corby sound Scottish, do they? Oh, God. Let's hope my mate isn't from there, who called me earlier on, and a right old pop at me. Donnie, that was. Let's go to... We're still friends, by the way. We text quite regularly. Laurelie is... No, we don't. Laurelie's in Los Angeles. Hi, Laurelie.
Hello.
Hello there. Lorelei, I'm so sorry. Can we start again?
Yes,
hold on.
no.
Lorelei is in Los Angeles. Hello, Lorelei.
Hello. Thank you for having us,
Thank you.
I just wanted to say first that we love listening to the show. My family, my husband is from London, and we moved to Los Angeles from there, and we just love listening to your show.
You've been everywhere. Where are you from originally?
So I was born in Romania. I'm Jewish. I'm kind of from everywhere. I was born in Romania, and the first and most intense discrimination of access I've experienced was there in my country of birth. My grandmother was from Oradea, which is close to Hungary.
Right. Wow.
And
okay.
my mother married my father in Moldova, not the country Moldova, but the region. In Romania, which is close to Ukraine. and Moldova itself. So it's a very different accent. And my grandmother would refuse to speak to me because she would pretend not to understand my accent. So she was very much against people from the eastern side of Romania. And then I moved to Spain. I grew up in Madrid mostly. And as you know, in Spain, you can be Spanish and go to Andalusia. It's very hard to understand the language. But I would like to say that besides the accent, I think that a very big part of, I speak 5 languages, by the way.
How many? 5, did you say?
5, yes.
What is it? So Romanian, English, Spanish?
Spanish,
right.
French, and Italian.
Wow.
And there's more to a language than the accent. For example, living in London and living in Los Angeles, or Los Angeles, depending on your GPS, there's more than just the accent. There's a lot of the phrases you're using, the words,
I see.
and so on.
Right. So what you're actually saying some of the time, as opposed to how you're saying it.
Exactly. So, for example, some positive discrimination. There is a very big British community here in Los Angeles, and everybody says that if you have an issue with customer service, you call and you speak as Britishly as possible.
Really?
And they love it. They just love the accent, and you mostly will get away with anything.
So you don't get away with that here.
Yeah, indeed. On the other hand, my Spanish is Castellano, so it's very different from the Latin American Spanish that is spoken here in LA. And so when I speak to, let's say, Mexicans, they don't get most things I say because there are different words we're using for different things.
Yes.
And my mother is a doctor in linguistics. So I also... Yeah, I have a lot to say on this. There's a lot in language beyond an accent, but there is a lot of discrimination, and I think that also the fact that people will say, I don't understand what you're saying, plays into the fact that it's hard for you to open your mouth properly to enunciate.
Do you find it hard to differentiate accents from a different country? So what I'm meaning is, I don't think I'd be able to tell what's northern versus southern French, whereas given your husband is a Londoner, did you say, or your partner's a Londoner, are you able to tell the difference between... Obviously you are, right? Whereas I find that hard in other countries, not the States, for example, but in sort of non-English speaking languages, I find it hard to detect the accent.
Yes. I think if you're not very familiar with the country, it's very hard to do so. My partner would always be asked if he's Australian, which he hated.
Right.
You know, are you from Australia?
Where is he from?
I'm not. He was born in London, but his father was born in Liverpool. My father-in-law is 89 years old, and he wanted to break out of his minor community and become an actor in the 60s and 70s. So he trained a lot to get rid of his Liverpoolian accent so that he can find any sort of roles in television in Britain in the 60s and 70s. So a lot has changed, I think.
Thank you so much for calling in, Lorelei. Sorry for calling you Lorelei at the start. Lorelei, who's in Los Angeles and basically is an expert when it comes to accents. Thank you so much. I'm always jealous when people can speak another language, let alone 5 languages. Maz is in... and thanks for calling for the first time. Maz is in Swansea. Hello, Maz.
Greetings, Henry. I identify as British. I'm of English, Welsh and Eastern European mixed heritage.
Wow, right. You don't sound like you're from... like you were born in Swansea. Can I say that? Is that allowed?
A lot of people say that. No, that's the thing. I've spent my entire life within a 4-mile stretch of the city. I moved at the age of 14, about 2.5, 3 miles down the road. If I travel 7+ miles in any direction, I get, who's the English?
Oh, yeah. Wait, so if you come to London or England, what do you get?
No, I don't. I've got relatives all over the place, from London up to Leeds and Bristol.
Right.
And I don't have any trouble, outside Wales. But Wales is so divided. Not only is there the north and south divide, but even cities are divided by accents.
Yeah.
And I'm on the west side, so if you go to the east...
Do you think you've got a Welsh accent? I'm not trying to insult you here.
If you listen carefully enough, and I were to say certain words, you would pick up this strangulated R sound.
I'm hearing a bit of it.
Yeah. If I say something like grass or castle,
right,
and you listen carefully, you can pick up the sort of South Walian strangulated R sound, especially in Bath.
Wow, that was close. What do you think of the North Welsh accent?
Again,
I've got
they're
family
very
in
variable.
North Wales.
They're some of them, around Blaenau, Festiniog and that region, are very thick and are more closely related to Liverpudlian than other parts.
Yes, they are closely related. Yes, a good point. Yeah, there's a lot of people sort of in between those two regions, but...
Yeah. And if you travel from the right place, it's actually closer to Liverpool than it is to head to the southern border, if you start off in the right part of North Wales.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you start off in the right part of North Wales, it's actually a lot quicker to get to Liverpool than to the border.
Right. Well, that would explain why people in Liverpool were getting the emergency alert in Welsh, it would seem. Quite a lot of them were getting that in Welsh before it was in English. Yeah, let's not get into languages, actually. The Welsh language is such a controversial issue. Maz, so good to hear you. Thank you, in Swansea. I'm just going to do a minute or so with Natalie, who's in Blackheath. Hello, Natalie.
Hiya.
We've only got about a minute, I'm afraid.
Where do you think I was born and come from then?
Oh, God, I hate quizzes.
I'm gonna give you the question.
I hate homework.
I know. It's homework for you tonight.
Were you somewhere in London or in the outskirts of London? Is South London?
Well, no, I obviously, as I said to your producer, I live...
he's awake, is he? Right.
I live... Oh, yeah, he's awake. I live in Nick Ferrari country at the moment.
I know. Very nice part of the world.
Yeah. But where do you think I was actually born?
I don't know. South London? No? Where? No. There's a bombshell coming, I can tell.
If I say Dick Van Dyke...
Yes.
Actually, the worst performance ever. Really, bless him.
Well, let's not get into that. Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah. Anyway, he's 100 years old, by the way. I remember that we did a piece about him. So, where exactly are you from then? Because he was. I mean,
that was my clue.
But do you remember when Dick Van Dyke was actually born? The quiz question.
No. The clue was he did the worst accent ever for.
I know
where I was born.
Yeah, exactly. Could you just tell me where exactly you were born?
I was born in Wapping, in East London.
Right. Okay. So it'd be sort of Essex, East London accent.
No, it's East London. I'm East London.
Nice.
Yeah, no, it's all right. No offence to Essex.
Well,
I'm nothing sure of Essex. No, but I was born in East London and then moved over to South East London, then went to North London, then came back to Nick Ferrari country.
Right, well, lovely. We'll say hi to him next time. He's off this week, actually, I think. Thanks, Natalie. Appreciated in Blackheath, but formerly of Wapping fame. That's it from me. Thanks for all of your calls and messages this evening. Back tomorrow evening from 7. If you missed any of the show, listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. You can stay up to date with all of the latest news, videos and opinion. Watch the programme back. That's the official LBC app. Download it for free from your app store now. At 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, with his lovely accent, it's Ben Kentish.
Thank you, Henry. I don't know what accent I should do.
Nice one.
So I did the whole show in an accent?
No. Just doing your regular lovely accent, Ben.
Thank you, Henry. I think that's probably a good idea. Hello there. A very, very good evening indeed. Welcome to Late Nights with Ben Kentish here on LBC. Coming up...
We do have close conversations with our US colleagues about the situation here, and we will continue to do that.
Andy Burnham heads to Ukraine armed with blueprints for missiles that we're going to help them build so they can step up their bombing campaign against Russia. That prompting more warnings about revenge and repercussions from Putin against us, including one former CIA director speculating that Russia will hire terrorist mercenaries to attack Britain. So is our support for Ukraine worth it if it put lives at risk here? Or is Andy Burnham right to say that it's never more important to keep backing Zelensky?
On your radio, on the LBC app, And
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 10 o'clock, the Prime Minister's exclusively told LBC on his trip to Kyiv that countries, including the US, need to do more to help Ukraine. Andy Burnham's rejected a Kremlin claim that Britain's adding fuel to the flames of its conflict by sharing blueprints for missiles. Also on the trip, he and Volodymyr Zelensky have signed a deal allowing British researchers and defence companies to use battlefield data from Ukraine to develop AI technology. LBC's Joseph Draper explains.